All right, I am going to call tonight's meeting to order at 7:03. If you all would join me first in a moment of silence. The Marcus family lost Barbie Marshall this week and Barbie Marcus this week, and I would just like to start with a moment of silence and then the pledge. We can rise and then the flag over the pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, Margaret, would you call roll, please? Here.
Here.
Here. Here. Here. Here. Here.
Here.
Here.
Here.
Here.
Here.
Here. Here. Here.
Here.
Here. Here.
Here.
Here. Here.
Here. Here. Here. Here. Here.
All right, as everyone can tell, the mics are hot, so please be careful not to tap the mics or that all gets picked up on audio. There's no way to turn them on and off, so they are live all night long. So welcome to tonight's meeting. This is a joint meeting of the Town Council and the Board of Finance. Tonight's meeting is a discussion of the American Rescue Plan Act funding, both what we have done with it and what our department heads would like to do. We'll also outline a process for community input and next steps for meetings going forward. We are not here to vote this evening. This is just a discussion from department heads.
I thought they couldn't turn on.
It's on. It's on. So we'll start with an overview of ARPA. We'll take a look at the funds allocated to date, at proposed projects, step for community input, and the process moving forward. And just before the first selectman comes up, I just want to show you what you have in front of you. So tonight you have the PowerPoint that we'll go over. That's up on the screen. You have a long, lengthy spreadsheet, which is the list of proposed projects from department heads. You have another nice, lengthy spreadsheet, which is the current 5-year capital plan. You have a schedule of ARPA allocations to date. And then Councilman Buswell just handed out a letter from some of our youth sports that was just put on our table. And then the final thing is a Parks and Rec restroom improvement upgrade that George Estrada will go over this evening. And finally, we have a lot of people up on the stage this evening. I would ask that, we hold our questions until appropriate times. Chairman McHugh and I will do our best to get to everybody, give everybody ample time to ask their questions, make their points, but that we do so respectfully and we have a good discussion this evening. So with that, I will turn it over to First Selectman Tesoro to start the conversation tonight.
Thank you very much. So good evening. First of all, a little housekeeping. Can everyone see the screen from where you are? Okay. So I want to welcome members of the Board of Finance and the Town Council and members of the public who have joined us this evening and others who will watch this meeting at a later time. I also want to welcome many of our department heads who are here this evening as well. So this evening's meeting is the first in a series of meetings we will have to discuss and approve the use of the remaining funds from our allocation under the American Rescue Plan Act, otherwise known as ARPA. We have a unique opportunity in front of us to support community projects and programs with this funding that we would ordinarily not be able to do. I will make project recommendations at a future meeting based on input from the Board of Finance and the Town Council and from the public. My focus will be on projects and programs that improve the quality of life of our residents and their safety. I read the following quote in an ARPA article. "We have a chance to invest in future growth and prosperity, the impacts of which will extend beyond near-term expenditure needs." As Ashley said, we'll be reviewing the ARPA proposals in conjunction with our capital plan process so that we can have a detailed, in-depth discussion and ultimately use both these funding sources effectively and responsibly for our community. It is my hope that we can make these decisions in a non-political manner, working together to do what is best for our town. This evening's presentation is informational. We will be presenting information about the ARPA plan and an overview of the proposed community projects and programs. We will then discuss next steps and the process for community engagement. So with that being said, let's roll the PowerPoint. And thank you to Bill Chin, by the way, who is behind the curtain. So, what is the American Rescue Plan Act? Back in February, I believe, I did a presentation of ARPA to the Town Council, which has been on our town website since then. So just briefly, the Coronavirus State and Local Fiscal Recovery Funds, part of the American Rescue Plan Act, delivered $350 billion to state, local, and tribal governments. Funding portion for Connecticut municipalities is approximately $1.56 billion. Trumbull, and you have a sheet in front of you, received 10 million, well, has almost received, I should say at this point, $10,557,445.22. That is paid in two tranches. We've received the first one in full, and we've received partial payment on the second one so far. So we are a non-entitlement city or town in Connecticut, which means we're under 50,000 people. The larger part of our allocation was determined under the county distribution and determined by the population of our town. And there is a long list of all the municipalities in Connecticut, which I can provide you with a link to if you're interested to see what other communities have received. So on the bottom of this slide, there are links to the final rule and the overview of the final rule and frequently asked questions, which certainly the public and members of our Board of Finance and Town Council can refer to whenever they have some other questions. So you can go to the next slide, Bill. So ARPA funds are for non-reoccurring use, and so their use should be applied primarily to non-reoccurring expenditures. And care should be taken to avoid creating new programs or add-ons to existing programs that require an ongoing financial commitment. The ARPA timeline is stated here. Funds must be used for costs incurred on or after March 31st, 2021. The funds must be used by December 31st, 2024, or obligated, excuse me, by 12/31/2024 and used by December 31st, 2026. So the four eligible categories, I think most people have heard this a lot. One is to replace lost public sector revenue. Second is to support the COVID-19 public health and economic response. Third is to provide premium pay. And the fourth is to invest in sewer and broadband infrastructure, water and sewer. I can't see the whole slide, but go ahead, next slide, please. So again, here's Trumbull's award. And again, looking at the statement that's in front of you, the schedule that's in front of you, The current ARPA expenditures total $5,090,490.65. The monies that we are talking about now that we're looking to allocate to projects is $5,466,954.57. You will see as we go through the spreadsheet the amount that's been expended to date and the categories: infrastructure, public safety, other, which is revenue, loss, miscellaneous. Again, this has been itemized on the schedule you have, and that's the total thus far as of today, money that has been spent. Here's a list of some what other towns have done or are doing with their ARPA monies. We've picked out some towns that we share similar demographics with, such as Glastonbury. That's a town near Hartford that we are compared to. We are the same DERG for education purposes. You can see our population is very close. The allocation is almost exact between us and Glastonbury. So there's a short list of some of the projects that Glastonbury is doing. And moving forward to Shelton, again, I'll let you read those projects. That is not everything they're doing, but it is a good showing of what their projects are. Avon, again, another, I believe they're in our DERG as well, smaller population, smaller allocation. And Newtown, again, a smaller population, but you can see there too what they're doing or are planning on doing. So the proposed projects that we're going to talk about tonight are broken down into 5 categories: infrastructure, public safety, community improvement, social services, and other. The full list of those projects can be seen, and it's posted on our website now under that link. So again, tonight, as we said earlier, and I posted on the website, this is a meeting for informational purposes, and we will be launching an online form for residents and business owners to submit ideas via the Town of Trumbull website. And that will become live by September 15th, and we will keep that open through the month of September into the middle of October to give people ample time to share their ideas, whether it's about the proposals that we're going to make tonight or other ideas, because we will also entertain other ideas, obviously, from all of you. So this list is preliminary at this point. It will be added to, subtracted to, from, and we'll have that discussion starting tonight. We will publicize this form on the town website. I will make a robocall. We'll have email notifications, lawn signs, and more. And at the next meeting of next joint meeting we're going to have, there will be public comment. And we will also be scheduling at least 2 public hearings. One will be virtual and one will be in person. And those dates will be announced in the near future. So again, same thing, public input from 9:15 through 10:15. The next meeting is scheduled for October 27th, where there will be public comment, and there will also, we're also creating a dashboard on the website, a separate page on the website for ARPA, where you will be updated as we go along. Here's additional links to other towns of what they're doing with their ARPA monies. And people should know that they can contact my office at any time with any ideas, suggestions. There's my email and telephone numbers that people can call as well. Yep.
Hello, hello. There we go. All right, so now we're at a point in the meeting where we are going to walk through this spreadsheet. Again, these are starting points for discussions. They are items that each department head has put forward as areas that they see, projects that they see as a priority for how to use this funding. We will have each department head come up. We'll go through those 5 categories one by one. You will note as you look through this and you look at the totals that the total value of these projects far exceeds what we have funding to spend. So I think if you look at this list, you're well over $12 million. We've got a little over 5 to spend. So this is the starting point. From here, we will have to whittle this down. We will, need to look at what the community suggests we do, what board members, council members suggest, but this is the starting point. So let's start with infrastructure, which is the big bucket. I would ask that we go through a full section before we do questions so that we can present, all of the infrastructure items, and then we can come back and ask questions of those department heads. Does that work, Lainey? Or you want to do one by one?
We'll make sure to pause in between to ask each board.
Okay, so starting with economic development, I believe that Rena Bacalar is not here, so for Selectman Tesoro, we'll be talking about these projects, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Okay, so the first project up here is matching funds. And I can let you just take a minute to read what's in the detail there. These are matching funds to enable us to apply for grant opportunities. And this is something that Ms. Bacalar is obviously advocating for, that we put money in here, because this will become very important as grant opportunities come forward. We have a Connecticut Communities Challenge grant that's due on October 2nd, which is an example of one such grant. Many of the grant programs coming out either require or recommend using ARPA funds toward a match. And this will improve our competitiveness in those grant applications. As last thing she said there, if the award is not granted, we can reallocate those funds. Second project is a request for funds to complete the installation of the permeable pavers on the remaining section of the roadway and parking on Broadway in the Long Hill Green area. So there were grant funds that we received to do phase 1 of this project. I'm sure you've probably seen that area in front of Franco Gianni's and how good it looks aesthetically, and it's just better environmentally for the area as well. So this is monies that would go to do the other side where the other restaurants are located, Freiberg's and the Falafel. This will make the area more functional and complete. And they're presently seeking grant funds for this. It's been applied for on a parallel track, but so far we have not been successful in getting additional grant funding for phase 2. So if these grant funds are awarded, these funds could be reallocated again. So this is something I think that's important to all of us to finish that area. And, I know that Rena has applied for the second phase over the last few years, and we've been unsuccessful in getting grant money for it. So the last is the Long Hill Green, and this is the green itself. And this request is for additional funding that could be used to design and implement improvements on the green lawn space in Long Hill Green. This includes plantings, seating, and a stretch of rock will be, I'm having a hard time reading, sorry, because it's so small, to demarcate the area. Previous grants were used to clean, clear, and do partial grading of the area. So this would be funding to finish the green, obviously to make that space look more pleasing there. So those are the 3 projects that have been suggested by Ms. Bacalar.
All right, thank you. We will, like I said, we'll move through this whole thing and then come back for questions. So next up is Public Works, George Estrada. There you are, George. Come on up to the mic. And if you want to walk us through your projects, that would be wonderful.
Sure. The first one up is the drone. The drone would be for the engineering department to conduct surveys and inspections It would also allow us to do before and after surveys of paving during the paving program. The second one is the Town Hall HVAC improvements. We actually have bid the first phase, which you all supported last year, which was a $400,000 allocation. That bid was out on the street. We have 3 qualified bidders that we are now vetting, and that will be awarded within the next month. But if you remember, there was an incremental phasing of the improvements in Town Hall for the HVAC because we can't do everything in one fell swoop because of the disruption to operations within the building. So we're adding funding in here to help through the next phase, and in total there are 4 phases in total within the capital plan, the 5-year capital plan. Pavement preservation, we had extensive discussions about that during the budget season last year, and that is the funding that we have in here, the $500,000. Last year we funded $50,000. This summer I think you saw a lot of crack sealing throughout town. This would be to accelerate the pavement preservation program, and what that would do is help us preserve the integrity of the roads that the town has invested in already. Because once they reach, as we discussed, that 7 to 12 year range, there are a number of different maintenance options available to preserve the integrity of those roads, extend their life, so that we don't have to reinvest in them, and the funds that we have annually, we can continue to address roads that have not been addressed in a long time. So that's an important component to our improving our roadways in Trumbull in the long term. And the last one, townwide drainage, that's for inspection and repair and stormwater management in general. I can tell you that most of the infrastructure, as we've discussed before in Trumbull, was from the 60s and 70s. We have a lot of that today needing replacement, not just repair. Our town engineer, unfortunately, is not here this evening because he's on Old Town Road right now because they're trying to address a failure in one of our infrastructures there this afternoon. So that's an ongoing challenge for the town.
All right, thank you, George. Next up is library. Stefan is not here this evening. He had a death in the family. And so we will table the projects that are on the library section. Everyone can review them. And then at our October meeting, Stefan should be back and we can go through those projects. So we will move right along to technology. And Bill, are you going to head to the podium? You want to grab my mic? All right, Bill's going to do technology.
So we've got 2 projects here. The first project being video broadcasting equipment. And this is a replacement for the equipment that we call the TriCaster in the Town Hall Council chambers. The Board of Ed just recently put out a bid and made the award for a replacement on their TriCaster system in the Long Hill building, the administrative building. So they're in the process of replacing that already, and I guess $35,000 has been allocated by the town council for this project to replace the equipment in the town hall council chambers that will match the equipment in the Long Hill building. Too far. Oh, good. So the second project is video conferencing. So as we all have painfully gone through, online Zoom meetings and hybrid meetings have brought out a lot of resident participation in government, which is great to see. And so we're looking to outfit some of our major conference rooms with video conferencing equipment to make that a little bit easier for us to run those meetings and for residents to continue to interact with government. And there are a few rooms there that we prioritize, and we'll look to also at the bottom there potentially do more rooms in the future. And the ones that we're looking at right now include the council chambers, the Long Hill room in Town Hall, which is the one by the First Selectman's office, the Nichols room, the library community room, the Board of Ed the high school auditorium, this room here. So we would look to do those. And we're seeking quotes on the last two currently.
Thanks, Bill. And that $124,155 figure is for the 4 rooms. It doesn't include, obviously, the Board of Ed room and the Trumbull High School auditorium, since we don't have cost estimates there. Okay, and Bill is saying that it should total about $150, $159 when you add in those 2 other rooms. All right, next up is the Trumbull Nature and Arts Center. And who do we have here this evening? Ms. Bauman? George? Whoever would like to come up for the Nature Center.
Hi, I'm Cheryl Bauman. I'm the director of the patrons of the Trumbull Nature and Arts Center. We're the 501c3 that operates the programs and does the fundraising. Also here is Jack Boynton. He's on the Nature Commission. So we are requesting funding for capital improvements. The first of all is the ramp that goes up to our front door. It was installed way back when the town first purchased the property, and it's deteriorating. I have pictures with me if anybody wants to see, but the ramp is warping. There's exposed nails, and actually at one point the town had to come in. There was a collapse, and when the town had to come in, like Dimitri Paris came in and put bricks, cement blocks underneath to support it. So that's the first thing. On the side of the building facing the pond, there are 2 retaining walls. Oh, you have the pictures. Thanks, Cindy. So you can't really tell, it's dark, but that's one of the outside doors. All the doors on the outside, there's a lot. That's the one that faces the pond and an old driveway that was used. And there are holes that are breaching into the building, allowing rodents to get through there. We are part of the town's pest control, but still, it's a safety issue and aesthetically unpleasing. And that over there, that's one of the retaining walls that is collapsing. The cement is deteriorating and the rebar is exposed on both sides there. So that's another safety hazard that we're concerned with. That's nails from the ramp that are exposed. Yep, you got it. That's the ramp that you could see it's warping. When we walk on there, there are loose boards. I mean, it's definitely at the end of its lifetime and it needs to be addressed. That's one of the outside doors. The flashing on the roof was blown off during a storm several years ago. We had asked for repairs. I know there's other priorities, but it hasn't been done yet. So that needs to be repaired. And we'd like the roof looked at and assessed. In the front, there are gutters that are also missing, and that's affecting the integrity of the roof. And sometimes the weather vane that's on top, like I think north, south, and west flew off. I think only east, or something like that. It's the little letters, so it needs to some attention. Yeah, that's in the front. There was a small leak inside the area that we use for a classroom in the left. You could see I didn't take a picture of it, but you could see a little water damage, and how the gutter just ends right there, and the water pours out. So, we do what we can. We're an outdoor nature center, but our building is important as well. So, thank you for your consideration. Got it?
All right, thank you. And then, last but not least, WPCA. George, are you doing that one as well? It looks like yes.
Again, apologies from our town engineer, Bill Maurer, but he's on site on Old Town Road. We have 2 stations here. As you know, you've supported the improvement of several pump stations. We are currently underway on Old Town Road and the completion a year and a half ago of the Beersley pump station. So Wildwood is next on the list for attention, as well as the Whitney station. I will say both of these are on the 5-year capital plan. We listed them here just for consideration as an alternative method of funding necessary improvements that we will need to undertake. And the final one is the alternate flow study. That is actually underway. There is partial funding through WPCA at this time, and it's the exploration of what options Trumbull will have long-term in its sanitary waste system for disposal of the sanitary waste.
All right, thank you, George. So we will start with questions on this section, and I think Chairman McHugh is proposing that we do Board of Finance and then we go to Town Council. So, Board of Finance, do you have questions? Yes, go ahead. Go ahead, Michael.
Hi, George. Michael Barker, Board of Finance. In the HVAC improvements project, it says it's not only town hall but town-wide. That's not every building in town? Clearly, is there what is that limited to? The
listing of town-wide buildings is because we've received your support in engineering the upgrades for town hall. This year we'll undertake the police department, and we want to continue that. So a portion of these funds would be to bring in an engineering firm to continue doing the assessments building by building to help us determine long-term improvement.
Just to say it back to you, this is incremental in the same project?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. That's what I missed. Thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right, Scott, go ahead. Oh, sorry, Marty, I can't see your hand there. Go ahead, Scott, and then we'll go to Marty.
All right, either way. I have a couple questions. First is on the economic development for the matching funds. Normally we have visibility to the funds that they're looking to get matched to. If we're just giving them funds ahead of time, who's going to be making sure where that's going and what we're committing to?
I'm not sure I understand your question. That those matching funds, when you apply for the grant, they need to know that you're going to match some of the cost. So it wouldn't happen until there's an application for a grant.
Right, but normally when we're getting a grant, they come before the Board of Finance and the Town Council
that will
to
happen.
ensure.
No, that'll happen. That same process will happen.
Right, so he just wants to make sure that it wouldn't be that you've gone for a grant and we're matching funds, but the grant we haven't approved that the project is moving forward.
Right. All the same processes have to be followed.
Okay, so it's just extra money sitting there so we can talk about it later?
It would be, I believe, creating a pot of money that we could, as we go out for grants, already say we have X amount allocated, and then as we go through the process, we would still need to go through the typical Council Board of Finance approval process.
Which I get. I'm just, being that we have a limited amount of resources, putting money to the side that we still have to talk about anyways, to bond and go forward with anyways, just seems, my opinion, like a waste. Okay, thank you. And the only other question, and I'm taxing my brain, and it's been a long day, so I apologize. We had talked about, the library had come to us a couple times looking to, and I know they weren't here, so it's just in my notes, I want to put it out there, to make changes to the library inside. I don't know where that ever went, so I'd be hesitant to replace carpets and stuff until they gave an answer to that. That's more of a takeaway for October when he comes back, or comes here.
I think that there was discussion of some modular study rooms and some other things. I think this is a list of what they felt was most important as we're double where we were for our allocation. And when Stefan comes at the next meeting, I think that's a relatively easy question to address.
Scott, anything else?
That's it, thank you.
Marty, did you want to go next?
Yeah, just a couple of very quick things. On the matching funds, similar to Scott, I just would like to get some details. Like why 200,000, why not 400,000 or 100,000? Is there a certain amount required for these grants, or you just have to, so just a little bit more detail would be helpful. Similar question with regard to pavers, does this in any way reduce the probability of getting a grant if we allocate some money to ARPA, from ARPA to that? So I just want to be certain that's not the case. And how do we know that?
So we will direct those questions to Rena for you.
Okay. Two more quick ones. On the audio visual equipment, I'm a big fan of enabling people to make comments from home. Is there anything that we need to do to ensure all boards would permit this? Because I don't want to vote it in and then find out that some boards are saying, you know what, we don't like that, we're going to require people in person.
Require people, you're talking about the board members themselves in
No,
person?
that if people want to testify from home or make comments at home for the audio visual equipment, I thought that's what we're saying, we're going to put that in place at all these different, which I'm a fan of. I think that's a good idea, but I'd hate to find out that we do that and some boards have the ability to say that they're not going to permit that. So do we have a way of ensuring, if we're doing this, that, I don't know if the town council has to make some policy decision that all boards will enable comments from home once we have this audio visual in place?
I think I've been put here to address the question.
Okay.
Yes, under the state statute, it is a board decision. All right, whether meetings are in person or not. But so that yes, I would think the town council, whether we do it by an ordinance or whether we do it by some other resolution, that certainly would be appropriate to open it up. And then again, when the council addresses it, get into more of a discussion of how you want to do it.
Okay, for me personally, that would be helpful to know that that's done and that okay, that's that. And then finally, can you refresh my memory on the WPCA? I know sometimes when we're funding elements, the town pays for just a subset of it and people that have sewer system pay for the rest. So is any of this, if it was done through a different funding mechanism, would it, are there some people that don't have sewer that wouldn't be, in essence, paying for this? If we use ARPA funds, by definition, 100% of people that live in Trumbull, in essence, are paying for it. So I may be getting confused in terms of which piece of WPCA is paid for by everyone and which is paid for just by people with sewer. Can you refresh my memory?
Maria looks like she's coming to field this question. Go ahead, Maria.
So these types of projects will be for the entire town. It will benefit the entire town, so therefore it would be all taxpayers would benefit from it, so it would be charged to all taxpayers.
So even if we didn't do it through ARPA, we did it through another funding mechanism?
It would be through the operations of the WPCA, which means it would be charged through your user fees.
Okay. Well, but if it's charged through user fees, that's what I'm saying. Then it's only people that have sewer would be paying for it if we went that way. If we're using it through ARPA, in essence, 100%.
That's correct. You're right. I didn't realize that.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So I may have a concern on some of those projects going through because I think that may be better going through another funding mechanism.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any other Board of Finance? Go ahead, Paul.
Paul Tippett, Board of Finance. I think this is for George Estrada, if no one is here from WPCA. George, relative to the 3 proposed projects with regard to the pumping stations, 2 questions. One, do we have current estimates that justify and explain the numbers that are provided here in terms of what's being asked for in each case?
Yes. The WPCA works with engineering consultants, and these numbers have arrived through their determinations.
Okay, thank you. Second question is, depending upon how we move forward in the future with regard to wastewater treatment plant, 3 options I think are continuing our relationship with the City of Bridgeport, establishing our own such plant, or establishing a new relationship with the town of Stratford. Are these 3 projects still required under any and all those 3 scenarios?
The pump stations will be required under any scenario.
Pump stations would stay where they are regardless of which of those scenarios we pursue.
They basically will advance the flow to continue to move it to wherever it ultimately ends.
Thank you.
George, just a follow-up question to that. Those pump stations, are they currently in the 5-year capital plan, those specific ones?
Yes, they are.
So, Paul, the backup is in the 5-year capital plan, and you have a copy there.
Any other Board of Finance? All right, let's go ahead and go to Town Council. Councilman Marsh.
Thank you. And was a little confused when we were talking about video conferencing. There's some line items for BOE rooms and the high school auditorium. I know that the Board of Ed gets ARPA funds as well. Are those not projects that can be used through the Board of Ed's ARPA funds?
Do you want to take that, Vicki?
So that is a discussion we can have. As they have ARPA funds, I believe most, and I can't speak to this, perhaps there's a Board of Ed member here this evening, they can. I believe most of their ARPA funds have been spent. And the Board of Education, as we all know, holds meetings twice a month. And they do have a hybrid system that they're using, but it's really not very efficient as far as I'm concerned. And I think the public would desire to have better equipment in there. So this would be a discussion that we can have as a town, if the town wants to go ahead and pay for some Board of Ed expenses. And the same thing with this room here, because as you can see, we're holding a joint meeting here, and we've done this before with planning and zoning, and as time goes on, we may need to use this room more often. And so that's why I put that forward as a possible, for possible consideration as well.
And there are a whole list of other rooms as well that aren't priced out. I believe the ones listed here were the priority.
Yep, absolutely.
The first selectman, because of how often they are used by
the public. Right.
Anything else, Jason? Councilman Cento, go ahead. Does anyone have a question while they get the mic? All right, they're trading mics. Go ahead.
My question's about time. You only have 2 years to get these projects done, maybe 3 years.
You would have until December 31st of 2026 to get the projects done, 2024 to allocate.
Right. That's not a lot of time. Government moves slow. So my question is, if you have a project and you're in the middle of it in December 31st, 2026, and it goes to 2027 and it's not finished, what happens?
I'd have to check the guidance. I don't have an answer for that, but we can get it for you.
Well, yeah, the reason why I'm asking is, we're trying to put a roof on one of the schools and it's 2 years already. And you start the projects, you gotta move them along. So if you start these things, you gotta go quickly, because 3 years is not a lot of time.
I agree with you. Time goes
Right.
very quickly, Tony.
Right.
The project with the schools with the roof has more to do with getting reimbursement from the state. That's why there's been delays there. So, and the cost as well. So, I can't predict the future, but I understand your question, and we'll get an answer for you.
Yeah, it's just, we have to go out to bid, we still have to follow the same procedures as all projects, correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so it's gonna take time. Okay, I just want to bring that up, that there's not a lot of time. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilman Shively.
George, I think this is a question for you. I was looking at the description on the drone. First of all, I assume this is not technology that we currently have, right? This is new, not replacing.
Correct.
And I noticed that it said that the pilot of that drone needs to be a licensed operator. Would this be an existing engineering? This is engineering department, right?
Yes.
Would this be an existing person or an additional?
No, it would be someone within the engineering department that would be qualified as the operator of that.
Right, so maybe other than perhaps some kind of training or licensing costs.
Exactly.
It wouldn't be an ongoing additional salary cost.
Exactly.
And would you foresee any efficiencies coming from the use of this equipment in terms of saving in costs?
The services, we currently have to contract for services when we require this type of technology. There are many times that we have to take aerial imaging when there are development projects that are presented in town that the engineering department needs to go out and do assessments, inland wetlands, so that the drone would be used in many different facets of the permitting process and efficiency of the engineering department.
Do you happen to know off the top of your head, like, how much we typically spend on those types of services? Okay.
No, I'm sorry.
That would be kind of helpful too, because I think I hear what you're saying is that this is bringing in-house something that we're
exactly
hiring out for now.
Exactly.
Thank you.
We'll get an answer on that. So we'll take all of these questions and add ideas, get backup, et cetera, for the next meeting. Councilman Mecca, go ahead.
Thank you. Again, for Mr. Estrada. So looking at the sanitary section or projects, right, at the bottom, there is that reference to an alternative flow study. And I know this has been a long-standing contemplation about the possibility that if a different arrangement was made, it could save the town and taxpayers significantly in terms of what we pay for sewer usage and all that. So just wanting to get a little more information that you may have at this time about the potential for that and to what degree do we know at this point that that would even be a possibility and would be a cost savings? Thank you.
It's a great question, Councilman, and I would suggest that we schedule a meeting, an executive session, because I can tell you WPCA has been doing a lot of work exploring and analyzing what the options are, what reality will be, and it's a discussion that will need to be at this time an executive session, because obviously we wouldn't want to compromise anything with the relationships that we have.
We've already been in touch with John Green, who chairs the WPCA, and when we first brought that to discussion in the May-June timeframe, they weren't ready yet with some of the information, so they're just completing that now, but it is set to be scheduled.
Thank you.
Anything else on infrastructure? Any other questions? Yes, Councilman Isaac.
Just a quick one for Bill. I know the Board of Ed uses the OWL for their sub-meetings. Is that something that wouldn't be able to be used? Is this, maybe with tech, is this something completely different?
Sure, the OWL provides a 360-degree view of, it's a webcam, so that is an option. I have one contact who's looking into that option. They're just different ways to do video conferencing, so that's something that we'll definitely explore.
All right, I'm not seeing any other questions. Are we all set on infrastructure? Go ahead.
I don't have a question, just a reminder, and I really like how you introduce everyone by name. I think sometimes we take for granted that everyone knows everyone, so if people could just introduce themselves, that would be great.
Will do. All right. Thank you all for coming for that section. We will move on to finance, which is much briefer. And Maria, do you want to speak to this one item?
So as you can see, there's a lot of projects there to be monitoring and handle. And there's a lot of red tape with the government to file reports and et cetera. So we need someone to help us with that filing. And we want one person just dedicated to do that. And that will be a consultant if they're available, because everybody's on the same boat as us. They don't understand everything about this carpet. So that's what we need.
And Maria, just quickly, I want to keep you up before anyone else has questions, but is that $50,000 an estimate for a year? Is this somebody we would bring on for the life of ARPA through the 2026 timeframe?
Ideally, it would be as needed to complete this project.
Okay.
So through the whole process.
And you think that $50,000 would be?
It's an estimate. I really don't know until we put it out to bid.
Okay.
And again, I don't know if there even are consultants out there that are doing this.
Okay.
So maybe from finance anyway.
Before you sit down, does anyone have questions? Scott, go ahead. Mr. Zimmer.
Scott Zimmer, Board of Finance. It's not really a question, just more of a statement. We have a $180 million budget. We handle projects all the time. I'm not quite sure how I feel about spending more money to manage jobs we already do.
If you understand the government or the state, the requirements are unbelievable. The finance staff is extremely busy. We do handle everything for the town, and these are extra resources that we need because just with the CRF fund and the FEMA funds that we received last year, we have been audited by the state for the CRF, we've been audited by the FEMA, and we have to supply with every single invoice, every single payroll. It's just a lot of paperwork. It takes all our resources.
Anything further, Council? There we go.
Thank you. This is Alyssa Hall. Is this somewhat of like a project manager as well? Would it be someone
Sure.
to? Okay.
Yes, that
so
would
be someone that not just the funds but also the projects.
Right, and would understand the ARPA requirements and filings.
Okay, thank you.
And then Councilman Sinto.
Tony Sinto, this is for Maria. Maria, going back to paperwork and time, now do these projects have to be completely signed off on before you spend the money? Or can you spend the money and then sign off on it?
The money is already being received.
No, you haven't, but say you're gonna fix building A and it's not, you have to have that approved before you actually spend the money to fix building A?
Approved by this board because that was decided. These boards have to approve these projects.
So then where's the government coming with the paperwork? Like they have to look at the paperwork after the fact? And
Yes,
say,
they
oh, it's
order
okay?
they order the project at the end of the project.
And what happens if it's not right, what happens?
Well, they'll
There's
deny.
there's a fluke or something, whatever.
Yeah, they'll deny some of the expenses. If they determine that they don't comply with the requirements, they'll deny the expense, and then, the town will have to pay it from their operating budget.
Okay,
Or
thank you.
bonding.
Okay, this is my time theme, that's all. Thanks.
Councilman Mecca?
So staying with that topic, do we know if the other towns that have received ARPA funds have used a consultant?
They all are looking for a consultant.
Thank you.
Sorry, I just have to say, ARPA funds are new, so I'm not quite sure how there's somebody skilled as a consultant in using the ARPA funds,
That's
considering we're
exactly
all
what I
kind
was
of
saying.
doing it now.
Ideally is to get someone that can help us, but you're right. We're all learning how to deal with the ARPA funds, so we don't know if there's anybody available, but we would like to try to get someone.
Okay. Right, so this is a project that's being presented in the same way that the whole list is. This is the type of discussion, and then, if we feel like this is something of interest, then maybe we need to look into whether such consultants even exist. All right, moving along to public safety, and we will start with police. So Chief Lombardo, are you going to do that presentation?
Good evening. I will start with the bicycles. As you can see, we created that program a little more than 7 years ago because we felt it was another way for us to engage with the community and especially with most of the so many trails, the vast trails we have, the valley and the expansion of the trails. So it's still very important for us to be out there. So when I established the program a little over 7 years ago, we didn't have any. The town had never had a bicycle unit like that. So I reached out to an area police department and asked if they had any that they weren't using or that we could borrow for a period of time. And that's how we developed the initial program. And we've expanded it a little bit. We have not had them out as much as we would like because of our staffing shortages, but we will get them back out there at some point. It's very important to me to be able to, for the officers to be able to engage on a in-person relationships with people, whether it's at the schools or the valleys or wherever it might be. So each bicycle is approximately $1,800, as you can see. And I already mentioned the areas, the secluded areas that allow us, to, even if there's a situation where there's some type of an emergency, to get to in a rapid fashion as opposed to on foot. The next item we have is described are the body cameras, and as you know, that is a law now that every police agency must have. If you're interacting in a patrol fashion with the public, you must have a body camera. We were fortunate enough to start a pilot program at the Trumbull Police Department in 2016. And we took some body cameras in and we put them out in the field on the 3 different shifts because we knew that it was something that we wanted to do long before it became a law. So we did use some money from a grant a few years ago to add to the program. And what we would do in this particular case is the units that we bought in 2000, I think it was 17, around then when we finally implemented it in our patrol division. Some of them have failed. The batteries are just, they're supposed to last a full shift. They don't. They're midstream in interaction with the public or something, and some of them are just turning off. They're dying. But more importantly, the company is going to be phasing that model out. And it'll, I assume when they phase it out, there'll be a lot of difficulty in getting repairs, parts, or anything. So we want to upgrade our current model to the newest available, and also expand the program to more officers in the field, so everybody has their own camera. And okay, sorry about that. And this is a great way to do it. It's not only the law; it's very important for our department and for this town. It safeguards the officers. It protects our town, and it protects everything that we do. It allows us to. It could even be used in certain cases as an early warning system. If we are watching, we do review body cameras, and if we see situations where someone may need additional training, or it'll provide us with that early warning system because we can actually see what they're doing as opposed to just hearing what they did. So it's a great program. We want to expand upon it. The next is the regional traffic monitoring system. Our goal is to expand the current regional program throughout this area that involves other towns, not just Trumbull. As you can see, it was established initially with the Bridgeport Police Department's Fusion Center, and we are looking to continue expansion of that project. And it allows us to find stolen cars. It allows us to find wanted people in stolen cars if the car happens to be registered to them. But it also gives us, make, model, colors of vehicles that will actually pinpoint not just a specific registered car. So if we're looking for something that we don't have a license plate on, we can also look and say, okay, look for instance, a red Ford pickup, and it'll show us every red Ford pickup. And we actually solved a robbery case a few years ago that occurred in Trumbull through a traffic monitoring system.
I just want to interject that there are items on the spreadsheet that we have already approved and allocated funds for. So, you'll note that those red X's in column D there are ones we've already spent money on. And we just wanted to make sure that they were in here so that everybody had a full picture of what we've spent money on, what has been requested, and then what we're discussing tonight.
Sure, I'll skip those unless there are questions about them. I'll just go to the ones that have not been approved. The next is the dive team on my page 3. The department has a scuba dive team that is in really some bad shape. Their equipment that they use, it's about 10 years old. They are definitely at the end of life cycle. They need to be replaced. It's not this one. It's further down, Bill. It's after technology on my page. Public safety technology. Oh, did I miss one? I'm sorry. I apologize. Okay, I will go back to the all-terrain vehicle under equipment. This was something that was extremely big help to us, especially during COVID. We had the parks closed, but we allowed pedestrians to go through them, and it was really strictly controlled because that was really for hikers and bicyclists and people and families to get out. That was, as we all know, we were pretty much in a lockdown for quite a period of time, so it was great to be able to get out and do that. But we needed to be able to control that area in a quick fashion, because people do get injured when they're in trails, whether they're running or jogging or fall off a bicycle, and there are medical calls to those situations that we need to get to. And this allowed us in a motorized vehicle to get to those locations and just be a presence and patrol, just like the bicycles do. But the motorized vehicle gives us a little more speed to get to places. And I can't tell you how many people were so grateful and said to our officers, "I'm so glad to see you guys or ladies out here," because they felt that, I mean, you are in secluded areas, and there are times when things occur in these locations that we need to patrol and we need to be there, and I want people to feel comfortable when they're going about their day with their families and taking hikes or walks or whatever it may be in these areas. So it's important for us to be there. When the pandemic really kicked in 2020, again, I borrowed an ATV from an area police department that had one. We used it for probably 2 years. We had it, and I was very grateful that they allowed us to keep it that long. And I think it's time that we have one of our own. And the cost estimate, as you can see, is about $13,000. Now I move on to the dive team, I think. Okay, sorry about that. As I mentioned, the dive team has been around for quite a while. The equipment that they use is approximately 10 years old. Some of it's at the end of its life cycle. We would fully outfit 6 of our divers with complete gear, and you can see what it includes there. In fact, the current suits that they're wearing, they're pretty much fitted, and were not fitted for the officers that are currently on the team. The people that they were fitted for are no longer even on the department, some of them. So they're wearing things that are ill-fitted, and we need to be able to have them function properly, and I don't want to have a failure. I think that's it.
I think that brings you to the end. That was a little bit of a longer list, so rather than go to the next sections and come back, why don't we go ahead and do questions on public safety now, and then we'll move on to EMS. And this time, why don't we start with the council? So if anybody in the council has questions for Chief Lombardo, let me know. Go ahead, Councilman Councilman Buswell. Either way, however you want to go. Mary and then Mike.
Mary Isaac. Just a quick one. Did we approve, and I should remember this, but in the last budget, the traffic monitoring system, I believe we approved 2 of those, 2 of the cameras. Am I remembering that correctly?
That would be for
Or is it something different?
speed monitoring devices. Those are the things that they're portable, and we move them around throughout town, and it flashes what your speed is as you drive through that area. And it's more of a traffic calming device to get people to slow in areas where we get complaints about speeding cars.
So I'm with you that we have had a discussion. If nothing else, we've had a discussion on this regional traffic monitoring system, and whether we ended up allocating funding for that, I can't recall, but we did have a discussion on this. Okay, let's come back to that question if that's okay.
I don't think we've budgeted. Okay.
All right, we'll circle back. Councilman Buswell, would you like to go now?
Sure, thank you. Mike Buswell. Hi, Chief. Hi. So my question was in regards to the body cameras. It says expand the program to more officers. Now, you said this is a mandate that all officers need to wear the body cam, and then by reading the line, expand the program to more officers. Are we short body cams? Like in a given shift, does everyone have the necessary equipment?
Generally, yes. But I want to expand the program where everybody has, so you don't have the same cameras out there 24 hours a day, because we run 3 shifts all the time. So eventually, I would like each officer have their own body camera. We'll get more life out of it because it's theirs. They'll care for it. We won't have different handlers, different end users, and hopefully the product will last longer and function better. It's like anything else. If one person's driving a car and it's theirs, they should generally will take care of it better. It's one person driving, it's one person using the wear and tear will be better. And we want to be able to expand the program so everybody eventually has them.
Thank you, Chief.
Any additional council questions? Councilman Massaro, go ahead.
Thank you, Carl Massaro.
Good evening, Chief.
Good evening.
Good to see you. I noticed in your list here you don't have anything for dispatching operations or the police station in itself. But I'm to assume that those items are in pretty good shape.
Yeah, generally they are. Some of it is, we just redid the dispatch center about 7 years ago, 6 years ago, I think the project completed, so we're in pretty good shape in our dispatch center.
Yeah, I know we've invested a lot of money in,
Sure.
in the holding cells and
Yes.
locker rooms and so forth.
Yes.
So it's good to see we don't need any of capital expenditures for those items. You do have quite an expansive list, however, so if I'll put you on the spot and say if you needed and could get just one item on your list, which would it be?
I would have to say the body cameras.
Okay,
I
thank
think,
you.
and the reason behind that is the body cameras are important to all of us and the people we serve. So it's not just good for the officers to have it like another piece of equipment that is good and updated. It's good for the officers, but it's also good for those that we serve, because it is a checks and balances of our officers, and that's important.
I'll just give you a question to consider for a next meeting of some kind, and that is whether your preferred item can be funded from an alternate source. Seems a lot of grant opportunities arise for these types of policing equipment.
I don't know of any for this right now. I do know that there was some funding that was, I believe, specific to the state police when the program came out, but we did use grant funding at one point to buy some of our current body cameras. I understand what you're saying, and we always look for grants for things, and I don't know of any that are out there for this right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we're going to be tasked with and challenged to do is to, pick the most important projects and try to eliminate projects by ways we can achieve them without using the ARPA funds.
Yeah, the body cameras would be my number one, and a very, very close second place would be the traffic monitoring system.
Those traffic monitoring systems, that's, I know that in your narrative here, it's for, policing active events and things of that nature. Are those used for monitoring moving violations?
No, we can't use them for that right now. We could if well, I shouldn't say no, because they are not used as New York City has it. If you go through a red light and it takes a picture of it, you get a ticket mailed to your home. They're not used like that right now in Connecticut. If we had a case and we had to build something that somebody reported, a red car went through a red light, we could do an investigation and decide that. But it's not an automatic thing, I guess is what I'm getting at, if that's what your question was.
Yeah, it was. Thank you, Chief.
Okay.
Councilman Marsh?
I just had a quick question about the data storage. And I note that you're getting more cameras and you have increased data storage. Is it a requirement that there be a physical server on premises, or is there any opportunity to move that to cloud-based to take advantages? I'm just curious, what's the life expectancy until you need to get additional storage?
So I have to defer that to our IT specialist, because he's the one that helps us with that and can speak intelligently about it.
Yes, so with cameras, it would probably require more data storage if we had. There's also a way, even though we have more cameras, the use of the cameras is still the same number of shift cameras. So even though every officer would have their own, they essentially sort of have their own on shift as it is now. So that 8 hours of shift video is stored.
Right, but there is a note there that there's new requirements for police vehicles and I'm just assuming that there's going to be increased data storage requirements.
In short, yeah, the longer you keep video, the more storage you'll need. So there would probably be an allocation of some block of storage with that as well.
Councilman Malazzi?
Are the cameras for the traffic monitoring only on roadways that are moving, or would they be able to be placed at places like the mall or any of the businesses in town?
You could use them anywhere you want. Right now, our plan is to use them on roads that vehicles travel through.
Thank you.
Yes.
Councilman Whitmire?
The only thing I would say is if we do go to private property inside the mall, we would have to have permission from them, obviously.
Good evening, Chief. As far as the body cameras, you're saying we have enough to cover 3 shifts daily. In order to have every officer have their own, how many are we talking in a ballpark? How many cameras would the $100,000 get us?
Right now, my approximation for that is about 70. That I need to defer to my assistant chief whether that's his project, but about 70.
Thank you.
All right, any additional questions? Otherwise, we'll go to the Board of Finance, starting with Chairman McHugh.
Chief, I have a question more about the technology required for the body cams, not about their necessity. The body cams themselves are small units. You indicated that you started the program in 2016. They're already obsolete at this time. Is it kind of like cell phones? Do they have a trade-in program? If you went to a vendor, could you do a leasing program so that the technology was current and you were able to maintain them longer? Is that something that you guys have looked at? Is that a bill question?
Yeah, let me have the assistant chief answer that because he works directly with the vendor.
Are there, I don't even know, are there multiple vendors? There's only one person that does that?
The short answer is yes to all of your suggestions there. What we're proposing is staying with the same company to take advantage of all those things, including a trade-in. It's a model upgrade to the latest version of the hardware, and yes, it is similar to a cell phone in technology, whereby when we started using these several years ago, they were pretty much state-of-the-art. Of course, immediately after, a new model comes out, and those are starting to be phased out already. So any department buying into this program right now is already getting the latest and greatest model. So what we're trying to get away from, and to some of the other questions that were here, is the sharing that we're doing now and requiring the cameras that we have to be on the road and used 24 hours is really taking a toll on the hardware itself. Whereas if we had the ability for one to be issued to each officer, it would prolong the life of the hardware and update us to the latest.
When you come back to the next meeting, if it's possible to have a better idea of what that would look like, what the opportunities are to refresh that technology, whether it's 3 years, 5 years, is there a plan for you to do that so that the investment that we make, we know we can kind of sustain that over a longer period of time? That would be really helpful information.
Very well. And yes, it is a long-term program we need to stay with. Thank you.
Councilman DeCruz, do you mind holding so we can finish the Board of Finance, please? Mr. Barker.
Thank you, Michael Barker, Board of Finance. Hello, Chief. Thanks for spending some time with us. More body cam questions.
Sure.
What is the video access and retention policy, and is that dictated by statute? And if it's sensitive to talk about in an open forum, maybe we could get that information offline.
There is a statewide policy that we follow. There are redactions that are required if it was naturally something having to do with a medical call, if it was something having to do with a juvenile, someone under the age of 18, we would make redactions. There's a tremendous amount of things that are required by Freedom of Information laws, so we follow that. If somebody does come in and make an FOI request for whatever data it might be, whatever case it might be, we have to follow that and do those redactions. That's, is there more to the question I might have missed?
It's, I mean, essentially who has access and how long we keep the video.
Only our department has access to it, and maybe Glenn could talk a little bit.
You could provide the policy.
That would be great.
We're really
Thank you.
talking about hardware tonight, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just informs the decision to buy more cameras and so on.
Yeah.
So, thank you.
Yeah, okay.
We'll get a copy of that. Mr. Timpanelli, Mr. Zimoff, and then Mr. Eisen.
Paul Timpanelli, Board of Finance, thank you. Chief, first of all, we should never miss the opportunity to thank and commend you for the special job that you do and Chief Burns does in leading and managing what is an exceptional department. We are thankful and should be grateful. Thank you.
It's the people in the field doing the work. It's not us. We're just kind of steering the boat.
And I believe that.
Thank you.
My question relates to something that's not on the list, and that is based upon all the research and analysis that you've done to date and all the pleas you've made to us, to the town council, to the first selectman, with regard to our inability to hire enough police officers. Is there no program or initiative that we could create or that you could create that would enable us to address that problem, knowing that what you think and what some people think is a needed investment, and that is with regard to a pension program, these funds are not eligible to be used for that purpose. So is there nothing else we can do with some of these funds to help us address what is a critical problem?
Specifically through the ARPA money?
Yes.
So I don't know what all the guidelines are for ARPA funding. And actually, Maria actually touched on it a little while ago, the finance director. We do have a program, an incentive program to try to attract lateral police officers. And it's a $20,000 sign-on bonus that is paid to them over a period of 4 years. So it's not like you start and you get the money and then it gets incrementally pushed out to the officer after 4 years. We did have one lateral officer take advantage of that. He started with us and he's in the field right now. As far as funding, is my understanding that, and maybe I can't speak to this, it can't be used for the pension funding as far as I know.
No, it cannot.
So listen, recruitment is a problem that everybody has. That is not unique to Trumbull by any means. In law enforcement or probably in any profession, I'm sure many of you have seen and probably have the same headaches we do with recruitment. And like I've said before, it's our retention that's become the problem. And I just, I don't know if getting into that tonight.
It's probably something we shouldn't spend a lot of time on here, but I for one would suggest that we do a little bit of research about whether or not, one, these funds are eligible for such purpose, and two, what is the purpose that we can invest in that would enable us to help address this problem?
They are not, well, maybe the first selectman can answer that better than me.
Well, you certainly can't use these funds or shouldn't use them for staffing purposes, because then you just create a funding cliff doing that. I just want to reassure everyone that the chief and I meet weekly, or if not more, talking about the recruitment and retention issues. And any suggestion that he has brought forward to help that, I've been on board with him 100%, because this is an issue, and as the chief said, it is an issue not just in Trumbull, it's an issue everywhere. So I just want to make sure that everyone knows that we are working together all the time to address this issue.
I think this is a perfect example of an idea that we have that we should take back. We charge the chief and his department to think about this, to look at what else is out there, and then let's come back in October at the meeting on the 27th and see if we've come up with any ideas. Mr. Zimoff. Apologies. Go ahead.
So one of the areas that you saw of eligibility has to do with revenue loss. And there is a $10 million amount of revenue loss that you can use to justify the spending of expenses. And it's pretty flexible. So we can look into other avenues perhaps based on that.
Scott Zimoff, Board of Finance. One statement, one question. If we move forward with body cams, I'd love to see a annual line item in your budget to keep on track to replace them and move forward, instead of every couple of years having to take it as one lump sum, similar to your vehicles.
Okay.
We
do that, but we do that every year, I believe.
But aren't we looking to replace 70 of them right now?
No, they're looking to upgrade the technology. They have a certain number of units, and I just asked about leasing opportunities. That's the information that Assistant Chief Lynn's going to bring back to us.
And the other one is, how many divers do we have? Because in this list, it said outfit 6 divers, but then also outfit 8 others. I'm just trying to see how many and how many are actually utilized at one time.
There are 6 divers and there are 2 tenders. Tenders are not divers. Okay. They work from the shore and support for the people that are in the water.
Thank you.
Mr. Isaac.
Funny, I was going to ask about divers. I forgot we had a dive team. I'm just curious, rather than, because we are squeezed on how much money we need, how many calls did that dive team make last year? Would it make any sense to only do half of this, or does that not make sense? But I'm curious how many calls, and when they make these calls, are all 6 or all 8 out? Well, if we just talk a little about that for a moment.
If we call the dive team, everybody gets called, and because we know that it is an expense and it's a resource that we have to expend with people, we've regionalized. We've regionalized with the Monroe Police Department, so we have more resources if something occurs in Trumbull and vice versa for them. And we've also worked with Fairfield. So Fairfield is available to us. We're available to Fairfield. So there's 3 towns that really work the program together. As far as call-outs, I know we actually put them on standby when there are severe storms. So last July, I believe it was, we did experience some flooding in Trumbull Center. And that night we knew we were having that storm coming overnight, so we had them in on standby. Do they get called out for other types of cases this past year? I don't recall of any. I don't recall any. But it's it's definitely a resource for us and the other towns.
So we should think of it as all or nothing. It doesn't make sense to do half of it.
That's probably the way I would do it, but if it's only half now, it's half now.
Okay, thank you.
All right, now Councilman DeCruz.
I had a couple follow-up questions based on some of the questions raised earlier. Just going from the most recent, I know Marty Isaac asked about how many calls were happening with respect to the dive team, and I don't think that was answered. But as a related question from your response, you talked about the regionalization, how we have a cooperation with Monroe and Fairfield. Are there requirements with respect to our staffing and ability to participate in calls as part of being that regionalization effort? And does the purchase ask, is that to allow us to continue to meet whatever, if any, requirements there are to be a part of that regionalization effort?
So I thought I answered Mr. Isaac's question, but the answer is no, we did not have call-outs last year. We put them on standby at our department for the flooding events that we were concerned with. Do we need a certain amount of officers on the team to be able to participate? No. There's nothing written about that. There's no MOU that says Trumbull will have 6 people or 10 people. It's what we feel that we need, because we also have to be able to know that we can operate and function independent of those other departments, because if there's a severe storm in Trumbull, it's happening in Fairfield and Monroe, and they're not going to be able to send their people. They're going to have to take care of their town. So we need enough people that if we have that flooding in Trumbull Center, or God forbid we have a drowning or something like that, we need to be able to be independent. We all learned that after Hurricane Sandy. That was a big learning lesson for everybody. And was there a third part to your question?
Yeah, I just wanted. I was going to raise that after that. It was about the body cameras. There was a question about the necessity to upgrade them, much like cell phones. So that seems to imply perhaps that there's software updates that phase out when the devices are no longer being supported by the manufacturer. Is that something that you're trying to speak to with respect to the need to upgrade, or you're talking about more the technological capacity of the device?
It's a combination of both, I believe. It's Bill can definitely speak to it, because Bill works the project with us. So it's both, but if Bill can probably give you more details.
What is the support timeline from the vendor for the devices? Is it a 2-year support cycle, 3-year, 5-year? How long are the devices under support with respect to the security and
ongoing.
software? It's ongoing?
Yes.
So if it's ongoing, then they are still being supported, they're not out of support.
Yeah, but they're phasing them out, is what we said.
Okay, so when does the vendor phase out support for the devices we have?
So I don't know exactly when these devices will be phased out, but they are definitely aging. We've had them for a number of years. And then, as you know, as things get older, it gets harder to replace pieces and parts. As it is now, when we send something out, it sometimes takes a good amount of time for us to get something repaired and back in support. And then, we pay for the support maintenance, and, we pay a good amount of money for that. And sometimes we get frustrated, but, it is what it is. And we send them out, they come back.
I'd like to take the discussion on the technology. We've asked for some backup information on what their proposal is and what that would look like as far as being able to support their equipment over their own call, make sure that they're able to refresh it. So let's let them come back at our next meeting with that information. So we'll tie that up so we can move on to the next session.
Sure, but can I just ask a related question to that point?
Okay.
Because I'm not even asking about specific technology requirements, but about what requirements that they're looking into. Specifically, are the new cameras being purchased solely to address the support life cycle?
They're going to send the state statute. It's actually a law that they have to have the body cameras. So why don't we let them send that information to us as backup? And rather than belabor the conversation this evening about the need for the body cameras and the technology, I think they've outlined pretty much what their need is and how many they're looking to do. Let us get the information that'll really let us examine what we can afford to do.
Could I try to finish my question? Because I'm not trying to question the need from a legal perspective, but more of the upgrade component. And I was just trying to wonder, is the upgrade component solely around moving to a model that is currently supported, or are there certain technical metrics that you want to meet? And I'm not trying to, I understand that you need to go back and get answers now. I'm just wanting to understand, is it solely around a support life cycle to move to a newer model that is supported, or again, technical metrics that you want to meet with respect to recording quality, codecs of how the video's stored?
Councilman DeCruz, I'm going to ask to do this. Can you actually outline the questions that you'd like answered? If you send them to Chairman Gaudiano, then we can actually send them along to make sure that those technical requirements are discussed in detail for you. I kind of liken this discussion to my first digital camera was 3 megapixels. My iPhone is way more powerful than that. So let's talk about that in relation to the actual request when we are doing that, okay? So I don't think that we can answer those questions this evening. And I'd like to
wasn't looking for an answer to those now. I just wanted to raise that question so we could get that feedback.
If you would, just put that down so we make sure we get the appropriate follow-up. Thank you.
Anything else for the chief? All right. Thank you, Chief Lombardo.
Okay, thank you.
We appreciate it and all of the detail you provided here. And then we will get you any additional questions we have on the body cameras and bring that back at the October meeting. All right, moving along to EMS, we have Chief Goodman here. Hello. Hi. Go ahead and walk us through your 3 projects.
I just want to see yours. Okay. So really this is all one kind of related project. It's the supervisor intercept vehicle, which essentially would be a backup vehicle and a dedicated community response vehicle, and the equipment that would go in it, which is a cardiac monitor, defibrillator, the Lucas device, which provides compressions in a cardiac arrest, and the associated equipment that's on the Connecticut minimum equipment list. And really all of this is stuff that we can use already right now with the call volume going to over 5,000 calls last year. And our staffing, we do find that we need additional vehicles. And where it really plays into ARPA very, very well is that it's eligible under the responding to the public health emergency response mitigation and prevention section of that. And how it does, it supports our vulnerable populations with access to health care, For example, the homebound PCR specimen collection, the vaccine distribution, and education, and it allows us to provide those services, many of which we did provide throughout the vaccine distribution, without decreasing our 911 fleet and our 911 response team. It supports prevention, mitigation, and congregate living centers and schools when needed. And with the new treat no transport protocols coming out from the state and community paramedicine, mobile intensive health care being approved in this year's state budget, we anticipate the need that we will have to have the ability to provide community paramedic services, which would involve the supervisor fly car going out to patients that wouldn't necessarily need to be transported to the hospital. So it really is an important resource, and it is very much valid under the current interim rule guidelines that we have in place.
Go ahead and go through all three, and then we'll take questions on this section. Oh, was that all three? Oh, I'm sitting there looking. All right, just kidding. That was all three in one. Thank you, Lee.
You got it.
We'll switch. Well, why don't we'll go so that she can stay. Board of Finance first. Ms. L. Aris and then Mr. Isaac.
One question, you did mention, and we've probably discussed this before, but just to refresh everyone's memory, you mentioned that last year there were over 5,000 EMS calls. Can you benchmark that against 2020 or 2019?
2020 was around 4,500, and last year was 5,200.
I heard what you said, but I didn't understand 100% of that. I want, as a follow-up, not to repeat it now. I know I have to watch the video again too, but I need a little help understanding the need. And when you were talking about the community mobilization, if there's just, I don't know, some bullet points you could give me on that so I understand that a little bit better, that would be helpful for me.
Sure.
But thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Anything else from Board of Finance? Town Council? No? Okay, thank you, Goodman.
Sure.
We will move on to Health Department and Ms. Bango.
Hi, how are you? So the first item is PPE storage. Currently, it's being stored in our basement, and it's exposed to water, moisture. So we're looking for storage that's climate controlled for that. The second item is safety lighting for our rear parking area. This is kind of the walkway and the safety lighting are actually one item. So right now in the front parking area, we have 6 parking spots, 1 handicap spot, and there are 9 staff members. So on an average day, when we have clients and we have the staff coming in and out, it's just an insufficient amount of parking. So we're looking to transform the rear of the building, some of the parking that's available there, mark it out better, lay it out better so the staff can park back there, and install a door where the excuse me, the garage door is, so the staff can go in and out there, and leaving the front parking area available to the clients.
Thank you.
And then also, I don't know if I mentioned, but just safety lighting in the rear of the building.
Perfect.
That's it.
All right, wonderful. Any questions starting with the Town Council? Yes, Councilman Isaac.
Thank you. So there already is a parking lot in the back, and you're just looking for a walkway, or would you have to do something in the back as well?
So right now, the rear of the building, it abuts the Unity Park, so it's not a defined parking area. So we would like it just, we would have them put lines down so it's a designated parking area for staff only.
Anything else from the Town Council? Okay, Board of Finance.
Scott, you go and then I'll go.
Just because I'm on Board of Finance. What's been the loss of the PPE? I understand that it's exposed, but what kind of loss has there been?
So the gloves break down, the masks break down, the elastics come off. We have to discard a lot of that material.
Okay. And are you guys, this won't stop me or my opinion on it, but I just want to understand. On a heavy snow day, are you guys open? Because
Yeah.
installing walks require them to be cleared. And that'll have to fit into the priority of Public Works.
So yes, we have, during the pandemic, we never closed. So we have a lot of people who come in still for their vaccines. So we still stay open.
I mean, like on a snow day.
If it's a heavy snow day and the town closes, maybe not, but we do maybe have some staff that come in, not the public, but.
Okay. Thank you.
Anyone else from the Board of Finance? Michael?
Probably keep it over here. Hi.
Hi.
Quick point of interest. Is it a refrigerator that you're looking for? What is a climate-controlled PPE storage thing for $2,000? What is that?
So they have mobile units that look sort of like a cabinet, and they're upwards, depending on the size, they can go all the way up to $10,000. We're really looking for something to put in our masks and our gloves and things that really we don't want to break down. Other things like gowns and N95 masks, obviously, those are more important, but just things like gowns that could stay in the basement in another kind of cabinet. We don't necessarily need the climate control storage for that. Or if we had an area in another building in town that we could utilize, but we're pretty tight right now. So this might be our best bet.
I actually have a follow-up question to that, Lynn McKee, Board of Finance. And this might actually be for George. George, what is the issue with the basement being wet? And is that something that do we need a dehumidifier there? Are there repairs to the building that are required? If we do that, is it possible to not need an extra cabinet? Like, just a follow-up question.
I believe if we were to make the proper improvements to the lower level to avoid the purchase of the cabinet, it would be much, much more expensive.
Okay, but is that something that we should do anyway? At some point, should that be on our capital list? I mean, is it a safety issue? Do we run the risk of mold if they're wet? We have a wet basement?
We have dehumidifiers that run there, so it's controlled to a degree, but it needs a plan and it needs an improvement. Part of what the health director just mentioned was the replacement of the overhead door that currently is the access to that space. That's just a large opening that does not really seal the space. It would be what we're considering is actually closing that, framing it out with metal doors that would allow for the offload of pallets when supplies arrive by opening double doors, but establishing a card-in key access location for employees, for staff, when they park down below, that would allow for the community to use the spaces in front of the building. Otherwise, we would have to expand the parking spot in front, the area in front of the building, which again would be much more substantial cost.
Okay, and just to refresh my memory, how long have we been in that building when the health department, when we split from the regional health department? How long have we been in there now? Roughly. Has it been that long? Wow. Okay, thank you.
Anything else? All right, thank you very much. So on the fire marshal, there's only one item and it's already been approved, so we will keep on going down to nursing. And is Lynn here? Or is there somebody else to speak to nursing?
Because I have poor vision and poor hearing. Lynn is looking for the vision screeners that they use in the elementary schools, and I think they still use them. They use them in the middle school, and the 2 new audiometers for the hearing screening. Her equipment is old, not sure how well it works, and this was her request for vision screeners and hearing screeners.
Pretty straightforward. So given that Lynn's not here this evening, why don't we hold this, and if anybody has questions on this, please feel free to email them to Chairman McHugh or myself. And then you're off the hook.
I'm off the hook.
You're off the hook. All right, so that brings us to the end of infrastructure. Is there anything else on that section before, I'm sorry, not infrastructure, it's public safety. To the end of public safety, are there any other questions on this? Okay, we will move right along to community improvement.
On your table, there should be a sheet labeled Park and Recreation Restroom Improvement Upgrades. There's some backup that was handed out at the beginning of the material, at the beginning of the meeting, for you to look at as well.
All right, Dimitri or George, who is speaking to the 5 projects on Parks and Rec? Looks like Dimitri is. Hi, Dimitri, how are you?
I'm great, everybody. How are you?
We're good. All right, take us through your projects, please.
Well, let me see. The unenviable task to ask for incredible amounts of money from you. Let me see, where do we begin? I'll just start with the athletic field. So I think this has been before all of the boards for a number of years, and the conditions haven't exactly changed, but essentially, we have thousands of users within the town of Trumbull that would benefit from another synthetic field. The various problems that come along with our current system is that during the spring, many of the users are incapable of getting their games in, either through wet weather or overplay. They're scheduled beyond their capacity. As you go into the later part of the year, the shorter length of day limits the ability to get the games in, and when it all comes out in the end, we have a lot of disgruntled, frustrated athletes in our town that we're unable to present an option to. As we've looked at the overall facilities, both in the park system and at the Board of Education complex, there are very few options left to, I'm going to use the term, economically develop another synthetic field, because there's a lot of other things that have to go along with it. Parking, the utility infrastructure to support a lighting system, restrooms. So at this point in time, Indian Ledge Park, as it has been for a number of years, is the ideal choice. The current softball field has the infrastructure to support a full-size multipurpose field. The idea of the multipurpose field is that it would literally allow for all athletic activities to take place, from Little League Baseball, full-size baseball, lacrosse, soccer, football, field hockey, and the works. The space is available, the infrastructure is there. Once in place, I think we are going to relieve a lot of pressure on all of our natural fields. As you all know, we've just completed the renovations of Field 7 at High School Complex. That is getting very close to a $300,000 project. Any kind of natural field has a limited lifespan, and it also comes with a limited amount of use that we can actually put on it. And so even though the space exists, our athletes actually don't have the ability to use it all the time. That's the short story of another synthetic field and where we're hoping to place it.
Okay, and I would just note that the letter I referenced at the beginning of the meeting from the presidents of a variety of youth groups is in reference to the athletic field that Dimitri just spoke about. Okay, I'm sorry, you may continue through the project list.
Move it up, Bill. The splash pads. So, splash pad, I have somewhat of a prideful thing to pass on to you. So I built that splash pad about 23 years ago. We put our daughter in it for a guinea pig to see if everything worked, and it's been supplying the town with enjoyment for all of these years. Unfortunately, it is a victim of its own popularity. When we built it, its capacity, its recycled system was much smaller. And as more and more people have discovered over the years, it has regularly failed. The reason being is that it has a 2,500 gallon underground tank, and as you utilize it, and it recycles and recycles and recycles, the more people that are actually on the pad itself, it's displacing more and more water. And as it displaces more and more water, it doesn't have the ability to catch up. So it can run, when we're having a peak day, it can run for maybe an hour, and then it will have to stop for about 45 minutes to try to catch up. On top of that, we do have some failing underground plumbing. Most of the structure is housed within a large concrete slab. It looks like spaghetti of plumbing under there, I can tell you firsthand. So once those go, our only options are to shut down incrementally so that we can continue to keep the remaining manifold sections running as it currently is. As I said, it's about 23 years old. It certainly is at end of life, and based on the type of structure it is, you don't have much choice but to do a redo, at least out into the field area itself. I have been able to get some pricing since I last spoke to our first selectman. Word we saw in Glastonbury at our comparable town, as it were. They put in a similar sized splash pad that was purchased in 2020, just at the beginning of the pandemic and before the major price spikes, and that cost them $550,000 at that time. Some of the calculus that goes into this is, again, how many people are going to be in a square foot area, what type of underground infrastructure is going to be needed to support it, and that's where we're coming to shore with that as a best guesstimate of what we will try to build towards. See if that answers any questions.
Go ahead and keep on going through your list, and then we'll do questions all at once on all of these items.
Bill? Oh, Tashua. So, Tashua Knolls, we have...
Dimitri, I'm sorry to interrupt. Is the, you've got the Indian Ledge splash pad, is that the same narrative as the Beach Memorial?
It is, but it's just on a much smaller scale. It is a much smaller platform. Apologies. Tashua Pool. So Tashua Pool, as many of you know, was built in the early to mid 70s. It is an outdoor seasonal pool, and it has a series of failures that are occurring. Mostly the kiddie pool portion, I believe it's about 4 years ago now. Again, underground breaks within the main drain, the feed lines. It's just no longer functional without actually having to dig up the decks. If any of you are familiar with the layout of Tashua, most of the plumbing to house that and the main drain to the primary pool all exist where the old diving board used to be. Some of the problems with doing any repairs there is that you're always going to be cutting through more and more plumbing, as well as the electrical grounding. And it's very, 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 very important that we always keep our pools grounded. So once you crack open that egg, you really have to fix everything once, because going back over and over again, you're taking on greater and greater risk. So as it stands right now, we are just closing down sections of Tashua Pool as well. About just after you came on board, we had the failure. So that'd be about 5 years ago. So we had a major failure on one of the return lines in the front of the pool just at the start of the season. Thank you. We did a major demo. We were able to patch it back together again and keep the pool running. But we know that there are failures with all of the gutter line returns, and there is questions whether or not the main drain itself is in trouble. The building is not ADA compliant with our bathrooms. The lifeguard station does not have adequate space for emergency treatment. And the actual mechanical room is, as I said, early 70s technology. it's hard to describe, but everything within that space is literally in a pit. Not the same kind of pit as Hillcrest, but it's in a pit so that it can draw prime, bring the water through it. That's not the way things generally work these days. We would have self-priming pumps, we would have everything on a simple level. And we also have to share that space with all of the chemicals that run that pool. So it's a pretty harsh environment. As a result, this year, our entire electrical system in there quite literally corroded off the wall. So it was a complete shutdown. So one of the recommendations, obviously, is to separate that, to have an isolated area for the chemical storage, for the safety of for the operators, and obviously for maintaining our equipment a little bit better. We're looking at phasing it as best we can. What that represents is building out the building as much as we can. There's an underground section called a surge tank. That's where actually the water balance goes between the pool itself and the pump system. That has to be built into the deck. It's be adjacent to the building itself. And we would do that central corridor that I was describing along the old diving board side. Getting all of that plumbing in place in one fell shot would be a benefit. We could set in motion whatever we're doing with the kiddie pool, whether it be turned into a splash pad or what have you. All of the plumbing would be there. Everything would be going into the new building structure. So when we get to that point, whatever we're doing, we're capable of doing it in the second phase, when we would actually have to go remove all of the gutters and replace the liner, which both are at end of life. More good news.
All right, and then take us through the restroom renovations, and then I am sure there will be questions
No,
on these items.
There's no questions. So long and short of it, you've all been very generous in giving us funding for a number of years for the town to phase in repairs to all of our bathrooms. We have approximately 13 identified bathrooms, restroom facilities within the system, and they're all in a different state of need and wear. We started off by putting in hot water. Big doings, folks. And then we've went from there, from sanitary tiles, upgraded lighting, interior painting, fixtures, some stalls, and now we're at the point where we're looking at the shell of a lot of these buildings, from the replacement of the roofs, soffits, painting, security doors. We are still in the process of doing. When we first started doing this, pre-pandemic, as many of our projects are, they're self-initiated and served by my staff, great bunch of guys, do a lot of work, but unfortunately, we got slowed down as the world did. And as that happened, the project's built up, and we've been chasing it ever since. Another issue that we're currently facing, I think I put it in one of my narratives, but we're chasing price now. So if we keep phasing this, we're losing value each and every year. So at this point, the concept is, why don't we just get this over with? Let's patch up as much of the stuff as we possibly can, try to wrap this project up in total, and move on from there.
Before we move on to questions, as I was built in the early 70s also, and there's been a request to discuss plumbing, a plumbing break, we're going to take a quick 5-minute recess, and then we'll come back for the rest of the meeting. We'll pick up with questions for Dimitri and the Parks and Recs. I'm sure there'll be quite a bit of discussion to be had there, and then we'll move on also to the rest of our items. So we'll take 5 minutes and we'll come back.
I'll just take a nap. I'll be with you.
Wouldn't be putting out $2.7 million right away. Is there really, or are we better off saying we're going to do a clean sweep of this and we're going to put all of this money in, whether through ARPA or the capital plan now?
So phasing anything is always more difficult. It is definitely a budgetary decision, so that we can try to utilize what we can, be efficient with it, not waste the money that we're putting into it, just sort of sequentially work our way. Obviously phasing is sequential, but that really is the key. If we're able to do something that doesn't put us further behind, then I feel that we've succeeded. And I am thinking about the budget that we're dealing with. It's a significant amount of money.
Okay, and then I think my last question is, phase one is what you've listed here, and I think there's a conversation to have, probably not tonight, but at some point, about the kiddie pool versus splash pad. I know both of those proposals are out here.
You don't want to hear what I have to say about that.
Well,
Trust me.
It's my understanding, right, that there's some sanitation issues, health issues, and so again, I would urge us to table a conversation on kiddie pool versus splash pad for this evening.
Very good.
But how urgent is that kind of second phase or third phase, however many more phases there would be? How long do those need? It's only 2? Okay, so for phase 2, when would that need to happen by in order to, not have what we put in phase 1 not be worth it?
So whatever you put into phase, I hear it.
Something's going on out there.
I have nothing to do with it.
They're having more fun than in here.
Whatever we're putting into phase 1 is preparatory, plain and simple. There's no waste of what we're actually doing. The one risk that is there is that you're going to see a failure that is going to need to have some incremental amount of repair that wasn't expected. So if the pool liner failed in an area, it's not impossible to fix, so you'd have to fix it. But then you would start, that steady decline of we're going to fix it again and again and again and again and again. So I don't think there's any waste in trying to phase any of this work. It's moving the ball downfield.
Okay. And then I apologize. I do have one more question. Sorry, Jason.
You said 2.
If we do, whether it's phase 1 or all of it, can we do that all without taking the pool offline for a season? Is this the type of work we can complete from September to May?
I think that is a difficult ask. Okay. I think if we're able to schedule things successfully, and there's no guarantee for that, we can kind of work around a lot of it. So, you can leave some of the inside fit and finish if we're dealing with the bathrooms. It's not the finished product, but we still have an operational filtration system. Those are mandatory, right? So we could do that. We could also work around like doing the redecking of the pool after the next season. You could almost phase it, but within a year. So okay. It's possible. It's just tricky.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Go ahead, Mr. Marsh.
Thank you. With regard to the, Jason Marsh, Town Council. With regard to the multi-purpose turf field that's proposed, how solid do you feel the $2,275,000 is in terms of being an all-in estimate? And does it?
Right this second?
Sure.
Right this second, I'm 100% sure because I just got it. When we finally get around to doing it, I don't know.
And that includes all site work, lights,
yes.
Parking, all that stuff?
So there's no parking because Indian Ledge is monolithic in scale for parking, so we're good with all of those things. The electrical is right there, so we don't have to actually bring in any additional utilities. There already has a demarc there. You're essentially looking at peeling back the existing softball field that exists above the amphitheater. There's a little bit of additional fill out towards the back to be able to square out a full-size soccer field, which is the overall dimension that we're shooting for, and everything will live within that space. The lighting would go in, would be run around the perimeter, and you'd set the artificial field on a new plateau.
Okay, Councilman Malazzi.
Hi, Kelly Malazzi, Town Council. I've asked some questions about Indian Ledge just before anecdotally. My understanding is there's one road in and one road out. Is there any concern over access in terms of the amount of volume of additional people that might be using the park at any time? Will we have to build another road? And if so, would that be included in, your cost here?
Definitely not. We're not building another road. So no. So if you think about really what we're effectively doing over here is we are repurposing a space, the softball field, which is already capable of sustaining the amount of parking and traffic that's coming in. But what this multipurpose field is doing is expanding its opportunity beyond a singular softball game. It's just taking the softball game and going and another and another and another and another and another and another. But the amount of people that are actually coming in at any given time is essentially the same, and the park can easily handle that. To answer your question about some of the problems regarding one road in, one road out, is if you're going to use that site effectively for festivals or really expand it, it becomes a significant limiter because you're bringing in thousands of people at a given point. And that's not quite the same thing as just really just scheduling out a baseball field or a soccer field.
Councilman Mecca.
Thanks, Bill Mecca. Somewhat piggybacking on what Councilman Malozzi brought up, was there some widening of the road? I haven't been there in a few months near the playground parking area recently.
Yes, that's all been part of the phased paving and drainage that we've been working on for the last couple of years. So one of the major concerns within the park itself over the years is that's a very, very small parking lot over there, and children are running in and out. So it was mandatory for us to find a way of getting more parking spaces there. So as part of the project, we literally doubled the space, and also we were connecting a sidewalk so we don't have to have people walking down Indian Ledge Drive from the upper parking lot once the project is completed. If we are at capacity, it's a little bit of a trek, but it's a safe trek from the upper parking lot all the way down to the playground area.
Thank you. I'm sure that's going to be very appreciated. So my question is, say the athletic field becomes a multi-purpose field. How do you go about, I know it's going to increase our capacity. How do you go about, though, prioritizing still so many user groups now that could share that field, given that it'll be multi-purpose?
So,
Dimitri, do you mind? I think that is a great question, but a conversation that's probably not appropriate and bigger than this evening. And so I would ask that we take this and we look at the policies that exist and come back with, answers, or have that conversation separately.
Okay.
Thank you. Anybody else from council? Councilman Satin? Oh, Councilman DeCruz, did you have your hand up? No. Okay. Go ahead, Nikki.
Okay, Nikki Satin. Thank you, Dimitri.
Hey.
I just have a quick question about restrooms.
Yes.
How many more do we have that are in need of renovation?
Almost all of them.
Which is?
Well, you want the list?
Well, I just a ballpark figure as to how many are out there.
13.
I know that we had, which one?
Parks and Rec restroom improvement upgrade spells all of that out.
Sorry.
That's okay.
That's okay. This was just handed to us at the beginning of the meeting.
Okay, and so what is an average cost per restroom because I know you have 56,000, right? And that's been allotted in the capital plan. You're asking for $100,000 more. So I hope it's not right here in front of me. But how much would you say an average renovation is to a restroom?
So there is no average renovation because every one of the facilities is somewhat different, and every one of them has different needs. What we did and what we generally do is try to assess an overall need in any of our facilities and target the worst of any given point. So at this point, we have a lot of worsts. As I started to describe to you in the overview, we started off without water, which is not the best way to actually have a restroom in a public facility. And so we worked our way back from there. Now we're looking at having to do a lot of masonry work with the interior doors, which literally have been there for 50 years and have rotted off. So you have to tear down the wall, you have to put in a new door, and it goes from there. I don't honestly know what outsourcing the full scope of the work would be. My intention is to actually start that process if there is any desire to want to fund the whole scope of this. We'll take all of our available resources, put it on the table, and then put it out to bid as one long list. Roofs, doors, or whatever else it is that is necessary at this time. Painting.
Councilman Isaac.
Mary Isaac. Back to the field. I know about 5 or 6 months ago, the Parks and Rec Commission had discussed the different field usage and which groups were using when. I believe it's when Mr. Mecca was there with lacrosse players. So they were talking about the Bills property as well as behind Madison, the lower Indian Ledge down in the back. Was that ever looked into to see what fields are in use at what time and what opportunities we have to use what we already have? I know this is separate from turfing, but just to see field usage for numbers that we're trying to get through.
I think if that's the same sort of question, if we can take field use and come up with some sort of documented report out of what's used now by how many people, et cetera, and then we'll bring that back in October.
Sure.
Okay. Board of Finance. Yes, Mr. Schubel.
Justin Schubel, Board of Finance. Couple questions about the splash pads. Are we talking about a complete gutting entirely of the plumbing system?
Well, if it's Indian Ledge, yes, 100%. That's got to go like right back because pretty much all the breaks are within that very small space and there's no saving much of anything. Over at beaches, on the other hand, most of the pump system, the return lines and the manifold, if any of you know what the heck I'm talking about, but there's a giant wall of plumbing essentially within that very large block building to the backside of Beach's pool, houses all of that stuff. So essentially, some of that is recoverable in the rebuild. But once you leave the building itself, it will depend on what we're actually putting back there. So every feature that you have in a splash pad has a certain diameter pipe, and it carries a certain amount of water. So if it's exactly the same thing, we have the possibility of using that line again if it's still sound. But for the most part, that's kind of the cheap side of the whole thing. It's really what happens inside or actually at the point of play.
Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Isaac.
I want to compliment Councilman Isaac for that important question because I had the exact same question. But I do think that will be important helping us understand the need for this field as we look at utilization. So as you can do that utilization by field, for me, that's very important. So thank you, Councilman Isaac, for bringing that up. I saw in the letter, and I appreciate the letter that came forward from all of you guys. I would like to understand better the income potential that's being talked about. If there is a way that this is, in essence, being self-funded by the folks using the field, and it's an issue of kind of cash flow for starters, that we have to forward this money, but ultimately the folks that are using this field are paying for this field, that also puts it in a different light, and I might be, that would help me get over a hurdle in terms of forwarding money to develop this, but ultimately the leagues that are using it are paying for it. I don't know if that falls within the rec department side or others, but I'd like to get a better understanding of the income potential associated with that. So those two things are important to me. There is a lot of competition for these funds, and that would help. Thank you.
Yep.
Additional questions? I don't think I'm missing anybody. All right, thank you, Dimitri.
Thanks, everybody.
All right, Trumbull.
I forgot one thing. I just want to compliment Rec Department on those awesome pickleball courts. Thank you very much. They're fantastic. Thank you.
We do understand that they are quite popular in town. Trumbull Community Theater. Mary Joan and Muriel, is that correct? Hello. Thank you for waiting. Thank you for everybody who's still here and listening. Why don't you take us through what the Trumbull Community Theater project would look like?
Well, we've decided, why do the kids always have to have fun? Why can't we have some fun? Community theater brings the town together in a lot of different ways. There are many people here in town that are that don't play pickleball, that aren't using the athletic fields. that enjoy theater and that love to perform. And since we've been involved with TYA since 2000, well, forever, but started taking over the program in 2009, there are many people who have asked us, why don't you start a community theater? Can't we do a community musical? Which would incorporate all age groups. And we think it would be really exciting for the town to put it together, to bring all kinds of age groups and talents together to create just a magical moment here in Trumbull.
Could involve the whole community, businesses, people of all walks of life, age groups, and it just provides an opportunity to have more arts and culture in our town, and a reason for people to get together and work together.
And just for clarifying purposes, we are not talking about building a structure, correct?
Oh,
we are
Lord,
talking
no.
about a program. Is
Program,
that accurate?
Yes, yes.
All right, let's go Board of Finance first on these questions.
Hi, Lane McHugh, Board of Finance. I just want to clarify that the estimated figure is for seed money to get the program up and running, and then you see it being more of a self-funded.
Yes, I mean, we've never done it before, so we only know from our experience with TYA the numbers and what it would cost to start a program.
And to develop support within the community and within businesses. I mean, it would require some town support, just as TYA and other programs do, but it wouldn't have to be, a fully supported. It would grow into something that would be supported by businesses, sponsors, also by the town, maybe perhaps a committee, perhaps involvement with Rec Department, Arts Commission. These are all things that we're looking into as to how that would work.
Board of Finance. Yes, Mr. Barker.
Hi, Michael Barker, Board of Finance, biggest theater fan on the stage. So if anybody that doesn't know me, my wife and I are both theater professionals. There's nobody, my credentials on loving theater are without question. So I'm going to ask some questions that maybe make it sound like I'm not for this, but I want to frame it that way. So it's $70,000 over 2 years. Is that one production a year? What does that get what does that get us? Where do we get with $70,000?
Well, the goal is one big production.
After 2 years?
One big town show every year.
Every.
But we also want to look at the possibility of starting the infrastructure for a community theater that could have a season and could grow into something where you could do one big show and maybe some plays or some smaller musicals.
But notionally, this is one production year one production year two.
Right.
And one of you would direct it?
No.
Oh, that was another question. So then, are there leaders from the community that you've identified to come together for this project?
At this point, we have not.
We know
a lot of theater.
But $35,000 a year might entice some people in.
Exactly.
Okay. And then this probably isn't something that you've thought about much, but maybe. How do other surrounding towns structure this? My experience in other regions of the country is that these are generally separate from towns, that they're not funded by municipalities. I know that happens a lot more on the East Coast, and I wondered if we had any information about surrounding communities.
Well, the only community theater that we know is helped by the town is Curtain Call in Stamford, which is on the Sterling Golf Course, which is town-owned property, and the structures are handled by the town and maintained by the town.
So there's a lot of cooperation there.
Right. Other than that, I know that Shelton, their program has been around for many, many years. Gary and Fran Scarpa started it. They are no longer involved in that, but when they were,
they had a building.
They have a building, and they moved them from building to building.
It was a town building that was
yes.
provided at a very minimal cost, like $1 rent.
It would be great to see some kind of survey, just because I know there are a number of community organizations, small scale stuff that happens in Lower Fairfield County. It would be nice to see some comparisons to see if municipalities invest, how much they invest.
Yeah, I know Westport Community Theater, it runs out of the town hall basement.
Yeah.
but I don't know much about that. I mean,
We're in the process of doing some research. We'd love to pick your brain, since you're a theater professional, and anybody else that has, and we do have connections at Curtin Hall and different places, and we plan to meet with them and get some ideas. But we've been thinking about it for a long time, but now we're really putting in effort.
Thank you.
Board of Finance, any other questions? Town Council? Yes, Councilman Malazzi.
Kelly Malazzi, Town Council. Do you intend, or are you thinking about starting some sort of having nonprofit status for your group? Have you thought about that?
We would be interested in discussing that and seeing how it could work. I think they do something like that in Stamford. The problem is once you become an outside entity, you can no longer use, it becomes difficult to use the buildings, all of a sudden you have to pay a tremendous amount of money to use the auditorium, for instance, or...
Oh, as opposed to being part of the town.
And so, and a lot of these types of things fail because they just don't have enough support from the community. And so you kind of need it coming from all different, from your town government and also from your local businesses and just people who want to volunteer and help.
And maybe I'm being too literal, but I'm just looking at the four uses, and it says nonprofits or small. I guess it would probably qualify under a small business then. And again, maybe I'm getting too literal. So
yeah, I think the nonprofit and the small business categories we'll talk about, but those would be actually funding for nonprofits in two categories of work or supporting small businesses. So I think that this falls into one of the other rather expansive buckets.
Cool. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Anything else on this? Okay. Thank you both very much. All right, that brings us to social services, starting with the senior center. And then let's do everything that Michelle is here to do, then we'll take questions on all of your sections.
Okay.
Okay, so senior center, let's start there.
All right, so I'll start with the senior congregate meal program. So we are currently funded under the Older Americans Act. And we do receive funding for this program, but it doesn't cover the entire cost of the program. I did an example breakdown here of what each meal costs. It is only a suggested donation for our seniors to participate, and most of them can't afford that full donation. So every month there is a loss, and we've been able to bring in donations to pay for that. But I think with the growth of this program, we're going to need to sustain it a little bit better. Before the pandemic, the senior center did have this program. We averaged 10 to 12 people a day. We started this program up again in the last year and a half, and we're averaging 37 per day. When she does a cookout, she gets 60 people. Everyone has developed a community down there. I have a wonderful volunteer here. It's run by volunteers, and it's a very close-knit community, and it just keeps getting bigger. So we do see a bigger loss in being able to afford the program. So we do want to continue to collect donations, but I think we do need a little bit of security there as well. As far as virtual programming, we obviously started that during the pandemic, and we didn't think it would last, but we realized that we were reaching a group of people we never reached before, and that's the homebound and the isolated. So when we started to slow our virtual programming down, we definitely heard from that population. We have 5 exercise classes right now that we run virtually, and we have 2 art classes that are very successful. And then we also have a program where every month they can take a tour with somebody who's in another country and brings them on a live tour of the country. So that we didn't expect that to be in our budget, and now we hope that we can continue to keep it in the budget. I think I'll just keep, I don't know if there's any numbers up there, but it's about $21,000, $24,000 a year to maintain that.
Okay, and then let's do this. Let's skip the nonprofit section for a second. Jump down to social services and counseling, and then we'll come back to nonprofits when you're done.
Okay.
Okay, so go ahead. Let's go to social services now.
Sure. So we have the local meals program, and that's a program that we're currently running. Rena Bachler got a wonderful grant from the state, And what that does is it provides anybody with meals from local restaurants who is either isolated, been in quarantine, is ill, and it's been a fantastic program. So the funds are running out. We do have to use those by the end of December, but what our staff has determined is that it has been an enormous help to our residents of Trumbull. Who we really saw it help were individuals who had a family member who was sick or ill. For example, a mom getting treatment and she just doesn't feel well, and dad works full time and now has to come home and cook for the family. So we're able to let them go to a restaurant, pick up dinner, and just get on with their life. So this program has been really touching, and it's helped a lot of individuals. It's easy. There's not a lot of questions. We just make sure that our residents are okay. It is temporary. They don't stay on it for a long time, but we do ask them how long they'll need it for, whether it's 2 weeks or a month or 2 months. So we would really love to continue that program. It's unusual. It's not something we've seen funded before, and it also has helped our businesses immensely. The 9 that participate are receiving a great sum of money for being a part of the program. So, and there's a bonus there as well. So we do have an emergency assistance fund, and individuals can come to us after they've exhausted all their resources to receive assistance for rent, fuel. We've paid for home care while waiting to get on a certain program. You know, food assistance and anything that is listed there, really. Since I've been here, we've spent twice as much as we bring in donations every year, and we continue to get more individuals asking for help. So, you know, we've helped 45 households last year, and that was, you know, rent, utilities, heat, electricity, medical bills. There's a lot that we've paid for. So during the pandemic, individuals who were on state assistance did receive a lot of extra benefits. We didn't see them as often because they were receiving more SNAP benefits. Their heating was covered more, and rent and mortgage assistance, but all of that is slowly going away. This year, we're expecting a lot of individuals to be asking for heating assistance. We know the cost of oil is high, and the benefit amount has been reduced again. So every year, we're seeing more and more of a need. We also know that people are behind on their rent, and it's rent or food. So we just want to be able to help Trumbull residents during this time as everyone's transitioning out of this pandemic, and we're seeing a bigger need. So the Counseling Center, Dr. Cornelia Morris runs a fantastic vaping group for Trumbull High students, but obviously we're seeing the use of drugs on the rise, and she would really love to be able, as an addiction counselor, offer a new curriculum for students. So there is a grant that the Counseling Center has, but there is a lot in that grant, and there's just no room in it for anything else, and we think this is very important. And she was hired as a drug and alcohol counselor, and this would really help her do her job. It would be working with students and doing support groups. And let's see, we have Here to Help. So this group has been around for a small time, and I'm not really familiar with it. I'm new to working with the Counseling Center. I'm sure some of you here are involved. It is the only group that's developed in Fairfield County right now that reaches out to families that have been impacted by suicide. And what they do is they anonymously send a care package out to each family with resources and information so that family can call back and get the assistance they need. And the Counseling Center has supplied the funding for the resources, which are simple gift baskets. But it's not a lot of money. A lot more individuals receive baskets than they thought they would. So they do want to be able to stock up on that. And what that gift basket does is it just obviously gives the family ease, but it makes that family reach back out for help. And that's where all those connections are made. So this is kind of what makes it all happen. And the Summer Teen Adventure Group, this is also done through the Counseling Center. I know Robin Beaver's been doing this group for years. I hear the kids have a fantastic time. It increases their leadership skills, social skills. It's really beneficial, but the program is very popular. There's a wait list, and she has middle schoolers and high schools together. And she says it's hysterical, the different styles they are. So she would like to separate it. She'd also like more children to participate in this group. So she would, in the meantime, while we're trying to find ways to, fund that, we do need to get it off the ground. The main fee is for transportation. It's for the buses. It's $3,000 a year for these kids to take 5 trips. And so obviously it would be another $3,000 to have another bus go. And it's important that we separate the middle schoolers and the high schoolers, just developmentally. And the students are requesting it. And I think that's all I have.
I think so. Thank you very much. These are nice feel-good projects and a little bit different than talking about drainage and roads and whatnot, so thank you. Before we do questions, I would just say when it comes to the emergency assistance funds, I would love to have an offline conversation or, to get some answers about who we support through those funds, how we can expand eligibility requirements beyond just those who already receive state or federal assistance to make sure we're getting that next bracket of socioeconomic status. And then, also looking at whether that $50,000 is really enough, given that we have until 2026 to spend down this money. Is that what we should have? Is this a bigger pot of money because the need is still going to be great over the next, 2 or 3 years? So I think that that's a really important one, and I think there's a lot we can do with that money.
And I do want anyone's eligible for that account.
Okay.
They don't have to be on any state assistance programs. Families have hard times. They need to save their money for something else. We will help them. So
Okay.
it's important.
I know that there's questions, so let's do, I can't remember who I started or ended with. So go ahead, Alyssa.
Hi, this is Alyssa Hall. I just had a question on the virtual program. You had mentioned that it was about $24,000. You said that's yearly?
That's for the year.
That's for
Correct.
the year, so that's
Right.
just 1 year.
That's 1
That's
year.
all you need. Okay, thank you.
Town Council, Councilman Shively.
So other than the one that actually said one-time purchase, that's a program, I guess, that you would be purchasing access to?
The curriculum, right.
Right, the curriculum. But the others, like where you say it's for 2 years or for 1 year, are these programs that you're thinking of as temporary extensions, or are these ongoing programs that are going to become recurring budgetary needs?
So for the adventure group, that program, we are actually starting to look at how we can fund that in other ways, and whether it's how programs are scholarship to the families. So we think there are other ways, but we need to get it off the ground and we need to figure that out. So in the long term, we don't want to depend on anyone for that funding. The Emergency Assistance Fund, a lot of these programs come from donations, and we've been using this town is very generous. We've been using a lot of our donations, and I think we spent in the 2021 fiscal year over $90,000 on food and Meals on Wheels. And that all came from donations, but we're spending it a lot faster than they're coming in. And so we want to be able to maintain these programs and meet the needs of the community. So
just to answer that in full, then, for example, the virtual programs, for example, this would pay for that program for 1 more year. But it sounds to me like you're probably going to, if you stop it next year,
Right.
you're going to get those same calls again, right?
Right, and again, because this is new, I think, we do need to look at if we need to put it into our operating budget. If there's any programs we can eliminate or replace. And then also we do get donations as well, and sometimes those can help, us add programs to the senior center. So virtual programming is very new for us. We don't know if it's going to continue forever, but we do hope it does because it reaches a great audience.
Thank you.
Councilman Malazzi.
Kelly Malazzi, Town Council. The curriculum that's delivered, that's actually delivered at the counseling center then? That's not something we're talking about putting into the school system or anything like that?
Correct.
Okay. And I just wanted to underscore what you said about the youth adventure program, because it is very important, I think, to developmentally divide those two groups. So my daughter's done it. It's phenomenal. So I would definitely say that's an important thing to take a look at. So thank you very much.
Board of Finance? Yes, Mr. Barker.
Michael Barker, Board of Finance. Hi, Michelle. I know that you do so much with so little at the senior center, and so I'm going to ask you this question with that in mind. The local meals program, if we were to approach that and fund it to less than that $200,000 amount, to half or to a quarter of that. Is that useful, or does that just mean you run out of money sooner?
It's useful. It'll help more families.
All right, so just on
Yeah.
any marginal increase to that is useful to you, and
Right.
the 200 gets you through the end of another year.
That could get us probably 2 years.
Okay.
It depends on how often families use it. But we do know the grant is ending December 31st.
Right.
And we do see the need and the benefit. So any funding would help.
Thank you.
Anything else? Okay, thank you very much, Michelle.
Thank you.
Let's do prevention program to get Melissa out of here, and then we'll finish this section with nonprofits. And then we're almost done.
Good evening, Melissa McGarry. I'm Project Director for TPOD, Trumbull's Prevention Partnership. We are a community coalition that's been working since 2006. We've been entirely grant funded since then. Our current grant funding ends on September 29th, 2024. After that point, the costs for the staff people who coordinate all the activities as well as our education activities would need to be picked up by the town, or TPOD would cease to exist, as it does. And we do, we started out as underage drinking experts. The landscape around substance use is constantly evolving. The braiding of education with our current mental health crisis and our increase in suicides, our increases in overdoses means that having 2 part-time staff people, we can serve as a resource to many of the people who have come before you tonight, and we can coordinate a lot of the activities to impact and support our families. So it is our hope that you will continue to fund us so that the work can continue. And so what the money that we've asked for would cover was our 2 part-time staff people. It would continue to allow us to survey all the students in grades 7 to 12. It would encourage us to use that data to put in programs and to support the rest of the town in all of their prevention activities. Because prevention does touch the police and EMS and social services and the counseling center and Parks and Rec and the schools. So it is our job, we feel, to be the resident experts, to go out into the broader world and to bring back that information and be a resource. We are also somewhat limited because there are other grants out there. We've listed a couple of them. They're very substance specific. So there'll be a grant. We get a little pot of money that can only be used for vaping prevention. We get another pot of money that can only be used for opioid prevention. There's no money out there right now for cannabis prevention. And the state is not expected to fund cannabis prevention work until year 3 of revenues, which is probably around 2026, 2027. So we haven't seen any significant prevention money coming down the pike that we will be able to use to replace what we will be losing when our 10-year grant ends.
Okay, and then with this amount of funding, that puts us in a place in 2026, right? If this were approved, where we will still have to navigate this, correct?
Yes.
I mean, we're obviously always looking for grant opportunities. We
Always.
know that. But I just want to be clear that this gets us 2 years, and then we're.
I will say, when you have the things in place, it's often easier to get the money.
Yeah.
So if you let it all slide,
Yeah,
and
we
you
don't
don't have
wanna
a
see you all
coalition, and you
go
don't have
away.
the work, and you don't have someone who because I write we write our own grants, we manage our own grants, so it gets difficult to pursue the money when you don't have dedicated staff and data. You need data to get, and so if you lose your student surveys, you then can't go get other grants.
Yes. All right, any questions for Melissa on TPOD? Okay, thank you. I know it was a late night. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
You want to do nonprofit real quick? Quick housekeeping question for Attorney Shobik. Board of Finance has rules that our curfew is 10 o'clock. For a joint meeting, do we have to vote to suspend our rules? No? Okay, thank you.
Attorney Shobik has spoken. Nonprofits, do you want to speak to that, or would you like me to just briefly speak to the opportunities? Okay, so if you go back to the nonprofit section on here, one of ARPA's eligible uses is to fund nonprofits through grant program. That is either to provide for revenue loss for nonprofits or for nonprofits to run new or existing programs to benefit residents in your town. And so the proposal here would be to establish a grant program for nonprofit organizations that serve Trumbull residents, not necessarily that operate out of Trumbull, but that do serve Trumbull residents. We would come up with an application, requirements, what that would look like to review those grants, approve those grants, et cetera. And that the funding listed there would be for, a handful of years through that 2026 period. We used to fund, and I don't know how long ago, we used to fund nonprofits in our operating budget. When did that cease to exist? Some. And so, this is a way to support nonprofits at a time when nonprofits really need the extra support. So that's what that is. Obviously, there's some nonprofits listed there that we know serve the Trumbull community. There are undoubtedly others as well. Certainly, if anybody has any in mind, we can add those to the list for the next meeting. But that's pretty straightforward. Any questions? Go ahead, Kelly.
Sorry, Kelly Malazzi. So this will be run by the town with existing town resources and out of town hall, is that right?
That's a question, right? So we're seeing towns do this differently depending on the municipality. We are seeing some towns contract with third-party nonprofits. United Way is an organization, is an example of organizations that towns are contracting with because they have that capacity and they do grant making. We're also seeing other towns run this themselves through a very simple application process. West Hartford's an example of somebody who has just launched a nonprofit and small business grant program. They have an application on their website, so if you go Google West Hartford ARPA grant program, you'll see what they do. There are others out there as well that are doing this.
Thank you.
Anything else? Okay. Brings us to the end of, or almost the end of our spreadsheet. We are on to other. We have two items here. One is premium pay and one is revenue loss. The revenue loss is already approved. So it's really just the premium pay for this evening's discussion. And I believe Tom McCarthy is, or First Selectman Tesoro. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo.
You want to start? I could do overview.
You're trying to get us past 10 o'clock. So
just a quick overview of the premium pay. It's intended, all of the rules are guidance on this for the premium pay. So there's no set definite rule, but they definitely give you guidance of where they want the money spent if you do premium pay. It is meant for low or moderate income employees. That definition is a complicated one, and I will get you the answer on that. That's already been asked of me, and so I'll get you the answer of what that means in Connecticut. It's a moving target that's not as easy as you think, but I will provide you an answer of what that definition means in Connecticut. It's also meant for employees that have performed essential work during COVID. That means actual on-site work. So if an employee was working from home or remotely, that does not qualify under their guidance. Direct public interaction is also part of it. So meaning that you had to have, during the COVID times, had direct interaction. It could be something like when you think of the police or EMS as that direct, or it could be providing a service. If there was an office worker that worked all the time, like Mary Markham, for instance, was there all the time as the town clerk, that would qualify as well. It would not have to be someone that actually, physically touched the public all the time, but someone that interacted on a regular basis with them in person. That's important. There is a very large range of dollars that you can spend on this, and it's a little bit crazy, to be honest with you, but you can go up to $25,000 per employee and up to $13 an hour in addition. We're not recommending that. I'm just telling you that is what the absolute cap is for the premium pay. And it must be for work already done, meaning they must have done that work in person in the essential work during the COVID period of time before you make the allotment. So, so it couldn't be for future work or future ideas. And this is an important thing. Any money that you do give to the employees will be treated as a wage. So there will be all the regular deductions, taxes, everything would come out of that money. So you should keep that in mind if you do decide to do something like that. We did have a few groups have actually made a request for this in the town. And the ones that made the request are on the list are the police union, the fire marshal union. EMS does not have a union, but EMS put in a request as a group. Emergency management, they also put in a request. And we believe that if you're going to consider that group of emergency essential employees, that you should really consider the nurses, health department folks. Thank you.
Do you have anything to add?
I don't at this time. He pretty much covered everything. We have looked into premium pay, what other communities have done or are thinking of doing or have not done. So we can share that information as well. If we don't have to do it tonight, we can continue the conversation when we meet again or in between. We'll share the information with you.
Perhaps that can be some backup we provide prior to the next meeting. You know, I know that this could be a lengthy conversation. Are there union executive session implications to having this conversation tonight publicly?
Yes, and I know this always, when I talk about this, it always surprises people that even when you give money to union members, we still have to negotiate that. That involves collective bargaining, and that involves restrictions on what the first selectman and I can talk about in public, unfortunately. So, but we will try to navigate that with you best we can. But so we may not be able to have a full conversation with you about a lot of details in public session.
Okay, and then I know, you know, from my perspective, I would love to know at some point, it can be back up before the next meeting, how many employees make up the groups here? Of those who are not listed here but could potentially be eligible, how many employees is that, right? How big of a pool could we end up with here so that we can have an informed conversation both about this list and then, again, what is beyond the groups listed here, who are the other employee groups in town who could qualify for this, and how many people is that? So
that was a lot.
At some point, it does not have to be tonight.
I can give you the answer right now of one thing, that if you take that group that we have suggested here, and have made the request that we've suggested, that is about 99 employees. That is a moving number, and EMS is a large part of why it's a moving number, because on a daily basis, there are per diems and that are coming and going in there. So we kind of created a criteria to get that number. You had to have worked during a certain period of time, and you had to have worked for 6 months for us for that certain period of time. And the period of time was March 2020 to April of 2021, and that was based on a number of communities are doing that time period based on the idea of March is really 2020 is when COVID really started, and April of 2021 is when the vaccinations were available to the general public for the most part. So people are using that as the kind of the measuring period for folks. If you work in that period, you work for us for about 6 months, and you are currently still employed, plus all of the other things I talked about with the criteria. So that group gets you to about 99.
So Tom, that takes into account that low to moderate income, and I believe it's 150% of something, right? There's a percentage of some broader number.
I'm going to be very honest with you. It kind of takes into account the moderate income. It is much more complicated of a question than that.
So there's more that needs more math and more
a lot more,
sorting
yes.
that would need to happen before we could ever consider this.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Board of Finance, any questions on premium pay? Town Council, any questions on premium pay? Jason.
Just so I'm clear, if you clear all the eligibility hurdles and it is determined that a group is entitled to or will be given premium pay, does every member in the eligible group have to receive the premium pay, or is there any kind of merit based? component to it.
So the criteria, we're following the guidance of the federal government in the state. But it's guidance, and so we really can almost create the rules, the rules we want to. But I think it's important for us to stay within the guidance. And the answer to your question is we certainly could limit it. There would be many collective bargaining implications to that because they wouldn't let us. I just make that assumption. So yeah, that would be a great difficulty there. There is no union in EMS, so you could assume that in EMS we could probably make whatever decision we wanted to. And remember that you have a lot of per diems in EMS. So we created an hourly standard of you had to have met a certain number of hours. I mean, not we, Chief Goodman and her staff did a great job of creating that. And so that was to allow for folks that weren't full-time to be, but were really the backbone of saving our community from COVID so that they get the opportunity to it. So we have already created a criteria that really has, the haves and the have-nots, because there definitely will be per diem EMTs and paramedics that will not meet the criteria that we've created.
Okay, anything else? Councilman Isaac and then Councilman Massara.
Yeah, just Mary Isaac, sorry. Do we basically plug this number then after the unions negotiate? So we don't come up with a number and say, we're thinking based on the number and based on the information you come back to us that we feel it's fair to give X amount and you bring that to the unions? Or the unions come and then we plug that number in if we choose to go with the program?
So ultimately it's your decision about the pile of money, right? And the direction you want to give us to spend with the first selectman. So you give us the criteria, we're going to follow the criteria that you give us. We're giving you the suggestion of what we think the best criteria is. When it comes to that, what will happen is it's kind of like at the same time, I would work with the unions to try to bring them to the same spot that you guys want them to be at. And I mean, for the most part, when you're giving money to the unions, they're probably going to say yes. There might be some quibbles about some things. I mean, they're going to want more, whatever we give them. But also that there may be some idea of how you give the money as opposed to like, is it a one-time stipend? Is it spread out by hours? All that kind of stuff. We would have a preference of how to do it, right? And so the unions, would they be able to push back on that a little bit and say, no, but we prefer if the pile of money is like this, it goes to this group of people instead.
But ultimately, Tom, we come and say we think we should give $1 per employee or we should give $25,000 per employee. Right?
Ugh, did you see me shudder right there?
Right, that is the town.
Maria shuddered too. I could feel her shudder.
Right, or we're going to give nothing, right? Any of these options, that is our determination, and then how you navigate that is
that's correct. That is correct.
Pay you and
right.
You know.
But they do have a seat at the table, right? They can say no. As crazy as that sounds, they could say no to the money. Okay. Or how we do it.
Okay. Councilman Massara.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. McCarthy. This line item has no dollar figure on it. So I could ask why, but let me ask it a different way. Groups that are mentioned here, the union groups, did they have a dollar ask? Or did this line item simply come because it's offered through ARPA?
So yeah, the line item's there because it was offered through ARPA. That's number one. But number two, all the people that asked because they knew it was there. The only group that put any dollar amount was the police union, and I'm going to give you a wild shot as to what dollar amount they put in, the largest amount possible. And so they reminded us very strongly that they could get paid, they could get the whole amount. And so they just created the cap for us, So, but there's not a dollar amount because it could be kind of anything you want within that cap. The dollar cap is the absolute top. So you can't go more than that. So.
Yeah, I'm just interested in the ask.
Yeah.
At this moment.
The ask was we want premium pay across the board. That's what the ask was. Without a dollar amount, except for the police union told us that the cap of $25,000 per employee.
But are you saying all of these groups asked for premium pay?
Each of the groups that I mentioned asked us for premium pay, with the exception of, I believe, the nurses in the health department, which we believe should be part of the equation if we have that equation.
Understood. Thank you.
And Christine, you had a question.
Yes, thank you. Christina Laris, Board of Finance. The state of Connecticut has a premium pay for essential workers, and has the town of Trumbull as an employer pointed out to employees that that's available, that they could apply for?
It's unfortunately not for public employees. It's only for private sector employees.
Understood.
Unfortunately, we looked into that.
Gotcha. My husband
well.
works at a private employer that did point out to all employees,
Yeah.
you may
Unfortunately, and I think that that's the dividing line, right? There's
Gotcha.
opportunity here, and so that
Okay, thank
our
you.
employees would not qualify for that. Councilman Cologne.
That was actually exactly the question I was going to ask in terms of the essential workers, because when Hartford released their program, police didn't qualify, for example, so I was just curious as well.
All right, anything else on premium pay? All right, that brings us, thank you.
Thanks.
Very much. Brings us to the end of the proposed projects that have not already been approved. We will do, about 10 minutes and no more of anything else that people would like to throw out there, any other suggestions they have. But I just want to quickly run through those last few slides again, right? So we have community input. We have that form that's going to open up so that everyone can all the way at the bottom, right? We have the form that's going to open up on the website so that residents in town can submit ideas, provide feedback on this list, which is now on the town website. We will have public comment at that October 27th meeting. We will have dates soon for 2 public hearings on this. And then, Bill, if you go one more. And we will also have that dashboard on the website. So everyone should put in their calendar an October 27th meeting here, I would presume. Okay. So I do want to give just a few minutes for anybody who has any final thoughts, ideas, suggestions. Councilman Malazzi, take us home.
I just want to say something about publicity, because sometimes I think we just need to make sure that we are, what's mentioned here in the deck is website, robocall, email notification, town sign, and more. I'd love for us to make sure that we are utilizing social media to promote the idea of the town, the input, the public comment, that there is no one single person in Trumbull that can claim that we did not talk about this for a really long time and make it known on every platform available that it is wide open and that we're listening. So so that might even include, for those of us in the room, talking to our friends about it and making sure that everyone knows that this is happening.
Yes, I think generally the town tries to do a really good job at doing that, and some of the onus is on people in town to make sure they're signed up for the public notification system, the email system. We've talked about how we make sure we get seniors who maybe aren't on social media. So yes, I agree this should be blasted everywhere, but this would also be my plea for residents in town to sign up for the notification system through the town website so that they also take responsibility for getting it.
So, yeah, thank you for that, Kelly. So you know that any robocall that I do goes right onto the website, goes right onto the Facebook page, so our social media page. Bill, goes onto the other social media pages and posts it on there as well. So we try to cover every way we possibly can to reach out to the public. I have in the past reached out to our senior population by sending postcards to them, because we know that a lot of them don't use social media and some of them don't have computers. So we have reached out that way, and we will more than likely reach out that way again with this information.
Yes.
I'll be really quick. Joy Cohen, Town Council. Just with an understanding of the needs of infrastructure and programming to continue and be kept in place, it's my understanding, and I forget which district, and I can find out, use ARPA and ESSER funds, and I know there's a delineation between BOE versus town, to create education trusts, because there are funding cliffs that happen, particularly in the area of special education, what happens to be my field, that are unfunded mandates, as well as costs that occur that are not sort of planned for. So that is just something I wanted to throw out there, and Education Trust would cover that.
Okay, thank you. Anything from the back here? Down on the side? Okay, so if anybody over the next month has thoughts, ideas, follow-up questions, rather than bombarding department heads, if folks can channel that through Lainey, myself, Vicky's office, that would be really helpful. And then we make sure that we aggregate everything just like we do at budget season and get answers and backup for everybody all at once. Marty.
Yeah, this is Marty. It would be real helpful as you're getting public commentary through that it gets aggregated back out in the same columns.
It will be added into that dashboard or noted in pre-existing projects that people have weighed in on.
Thanks.
Certain things. But yes, and right, I'm not sure how the back end export of that will be, whether that can be in an Excel file or what that'll look like, but we will make sure that every submission to the form gets out to the group. Vicki, do you want to end with any comments?
It's 10:10. Time to say goodnight. I don't have anything more to say. We will, you covered it all again. So our next meeting is October 27th, and in between time, we will reach out to the public, and we will flood social media and every place that we possibly can to get the word out that we want feedback from the public.
Okay. I do think I need a motion to adjourn.
Happy anniversary to Kevin Shively and his wife. He spent his anniversary with us.
Oh, happy anniversary. Thank you to Tanya.
Tony Santos.
Motion second. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, we're adjourned. Thank you everyone for your time. Thank you to department heads.